Chapter 374. Only accept cash. When Master Lin said those words, Han Yunshi almost laughed out loud. She'd been feigning civility for so long just for those words, hadn't she? She'd finally made Master Lin say those words himself. If Han Yunshi had said from the start that she was here to buy grain with cash, even if Master Lin didn't suspect her, his superiors would. She would have been chased away before the news reached the imperial uncle's ears. Now that Master Lin had said those words himself, Han Yunshi was 80% sure that this was a done deal. The moneybags were standing right behind her. Han Yunshi generously threw out a sentence. As long as there's grain, silver isn't a problem. Master Lin could tell that Han Yunshi was a rich person, but he didn't expect her to agree so readily. It looks like this young lady really needs grain urgently. Master Lin didn't give up and kept probing. Han Yunshi smiled mysteriously with a hint of cockiness in her voice. Master Lin observed her expression and knew that he had a chance. He immediately flattered. Mrs. Baring is extraordinary and must be a dragon or phoenix among men. As for Mrs. Origins, I'm afraid old man won't be able to guess. Han Yunshi's lips curved into a proud smile. She wasn't modest at all. Master Lin has good eyes. That's because Miss has good bearing. Master Lin laughed out loud. He liked arrogant women the most, especially those with a bit of skill and pride. This kind of woman was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Master Lin knew how to deal with her. Miss, I still haven't asked for your surname. Master Lin cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. My surname is Helian, Han Yunshi replied without hesitation. Helian? That wasn't a simple surname. It was the national surname of Northernly Country. In Western Zhou and Tianning, people with the surname Helian were few and far between. In Northernly, however, those with the surname Helian were members of the imperial clan. Master Lin couldn't help but think that such a rich and overbearing person had the surname Helian. After working in the black market for so many years, he'd done quite a bit of business in Northernly. Because of the soil and climate of the Northernly country, wheat could only be grown in a small area in the south. The high-yield rice could not be grown at all. The diet of the Northernly people mainly consisted of meat and milk. There was no market for grains from the south in the Northernly country. However, Northernly country had always been keeping an eye on Tianning's grain production. During droughts or floods in Tianning, many merchants from Northernly country would participate in the speculation of grain sales. Even members of the Northernly imperial clan would participate in the speculation, inflating grain prices while inciting riots in Tianning's disaster areas. Master Lin carefully looks at Han Yunshi again. He is more and more suspicious that this woman is from the Northernly country. As far as he knew, most of the women in Northernly liked cold and elegant makeup. While Master Lin was suspicious, Long Fei smiled. If it wasn't for the black cloth covering his face, everyone would have been able to see his smile. He suddenly realized why Han Yunshi had suddenly put on heavy makeup today. It turned out that it wasn't just to avoid being recognized by others, but more so because of the surname Helian. This woman was smart enough to use Northernly country as an example. Even he could not help but admire her. If this woman was born as a man, she would definitely be his #1 opponent. Master Lin began to flatter Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi's lips curved into a mocking smile as she allowed him to flatter and curry favor. She didn't refuse any of it. In the end, Master Lin ordered people to prepare good wine and dishes for him to drink with Han Yunshi as they discussed matters. Of course, when it came to important matters, the informants on the side promptly reported it to their superiors. They didn't leave out any details about this woman's origins, wealth, or personality. Miss Helian, in terms of price, may I ask Miss Helian to be lenient, Master Lin said teasingly. He thought that if he raised this woman up high first, then haggled over the price, this woman should be too prideful to lower her price. Who knew that Han Yunshi wouldn't directly discuss the price? She hadn't actually drunk much, but pretended to be drunk and hazy. Master Lin, haggling is fine, but you have to give me a number and let me know how much grain you have on hand. I'll be frank with you. If you have a lot of grain, then the price is negotiable. If it's less, As she spoke, she drank 2 more cups of wine before continuing, there's no harm in telling you, that store's price is very much to my liking, but they don't have any stock. They don't even have a mere 200,000 Dan. Tell me, if they don't even have 300,000 Dan, why should I pay you in cash? This sentence was confusing. 200,000 at one time, 300,000 at the next. That store was unknown which store she was talking about. Anyone who saw Han Yunxi like this would think that she was drunk. Drunken words were the truth. Although it was confusing, Master Lin immediately heard the key message. He had always wondered why this woman didn't go to Wu Shu's grain store. Now he understood. She wanted too much grain, and Wu Shu's grain store didn't have any stock. Actually, in times of grain shortage, 100,000 Dan of grain was indeed a lot, especially new grain. If it wasn't for the fact that the imperial uncle's estate couldn't afford any delays, Master Lin would definitely have whetted Han Yunxi's appetite and negotiated the price with her. Because in this black market, there really wasn't another store that could take out 200,000 to 300,000 Dan of grain. What a pity, what a pity. They hadn't even negotiated the price yet, but Master Lin was already feeling the pinch for the money he had just received. Seeing that Han Yunxi was almost drunk, Master Lin looked at the black-clothed and masked imperial bodyguard behind her. He was very polite. Sir, your mistress is also drunk. Why don't we do this? Why don't you rest at my humble abode tonight? I'll continue the discussion with her tomorrow. How about that? Master Lin was actually very curious about this black-clothed and masked imperial bodyguard. Although his face couldn't be seen, the invisible aura emanating from his body made people unconsciously wary. It was precisely because of this imperial bodyguard's existence that Master Lin suspected that this Hellion lady in front of him was a member of Northern Li's imperial family. Long Fei was even more astute than Han Yunxi. With just one sentence from Master Lin, he knew what he was thinking. Okay. He only replied with one word. Master Lin was overjoyed and immediately ordered people to prepare a guest room. He had already tried his best to buy time. Now, it was up to his superiors. Long Fei immediately carried Han Yunxi in his arms. He was nearly 1.9 meters tall and was tall and proud. It was extremely easy for him to carry Han Yunxi in his arms. One was dressed in black and mysterious, while the other was elegant and noble. Coupled with the dreamy Princess Carrie, they disappeared into the distance under the hazy moonlight. Everyone present was dumbfounded. They only felt that this wasn't master and servant, but a match made in heaven. Old Lin, this imperial bodyguard, is a little problematic. Once Long Fei and the others left, someone immediately spoke up. It couldn't be helped. Long Fei's innate aura was just that strong. Even if he had intentionally restrained it, he still couldn't completely hide it. Sir, that woman's surname is Hellion. Perhaps that man is also... Someone guessed in a low voice. As soon as this was said, another person immediately said, perhaps he is the real master. Based on his size, he must also be from Northern Li. If Han Yunxi and Long Fei knew of their guesses, would they praise this group of people for being smart or stupid? At this moment, Han Yunxi and Long Fei were already in the room. As soon as Long Fei entered the room, his gaze swept across every corner of the room. After confirming that it was safe, he carefully placed Han Yunxi on the bed. Your Highness, they poisoned the wine. It's a bewitching poison. I will sleep until noon tomorrow before I wake up. Han Yunxi took the opportunity to whisper. This group of people really didn't know what was good for them. They actually dared to poison her in front of her. Moreover, it was such a low-level poison. She immediately smelled the wine as soon as it was served. She even knew the amount and didn't need to use the detoxification system. The poison would only take effect during sleep. It wouldn't be too late for her to detoxify it later. She couldn't wait to sleep a little longer. She wasn't the one in a hurry. Stupid things, Long Fei whispered. Who knew that Han Yunxi would actually boast? No, they're very smart, but I'm smarter than them. This shameless tsundere. However, she was right. She was indeed smart. What Long Fei liked the most was the confidence and pride in her eyes, brimming with vigor. He was about to get up when he added, "Don't worry and sleep." With his name, Han Yunxi could sleep peacefully until daybreak even if the outside world was in turmoil and chaos. Because there was a servant leading the way, Long Fei couldn't stay for long. After tucking Han Yunxi in, he got up and left. As soon as he stepped out, the servant said, "Sir, Your room is next door. This way, please. No need. Long Fei Yi sat down on the steps at the side. His attitude was so cold that the servant felt that the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped. The servant didn't dare to say another word and ran to report to Master Lin. Master Lin naturally didn't dare to have any ill intentions. He stayed up all night waiting for the secret missives from above. One after another, the secret missives were sent to the Imperial Uncle's residence after 4 or 5 people had passed through them. The more the Imperial Uncle read, the tighter his frown became. It wasn't until he saw the 2 words Hellion on the last missive that his furrowed brows relaxed. Although the Imperial Uncle was the one making the decision, this information was all reported by Master Lin. Even though Master Lin reported Han Yunxi and Long Fei Ye's every move objectively and truthfully, no matter how objective he was, he couldn't avoid the influence of his subjective views, especially when it came to writing. These secret missives contained Master Lin's guesses between the lines. Thus, Master Lin's guesses affected the Imperial Uncle's decision. If it was in the past, the Imperial Uncle would understand more before making a decision. However, at this critical juncture, he didn't have the opportunity. The secret missives were sent back and forth by pigeons. After going through so many hands, it would take at least half a day to reach them. It was almost daybreak, but his missives wouldn't reach Master Lin's hands until noon. By then, Miss Hellion would be awake. By the time Master Lin finished negotiating a price with her and reported back, it would already be nighttime. There was no time to delay. The Imperial Uncle wasn't very sure, but he felt a bit more comforted when he thought of the Hellion surname. He knew that Northern Li's Imperial clan had secretly interfered with Tianning's grain speculation. Originally, he was planning to send Master Lin a secret missive and let him make the decision. However, after some hesitation, he decided to send someone to the black market who could make all the decisions on his behalf. The other party wanted quite a lot of grain, so it was best to use this chance to sell off all the grain he had on hand. Long Fei Yi had already gone to the disaster areas. He would definitely start investigating the corrupt officials at the grassroots level. Even if the Imperial Uncle's investigation reached the top, he wouldn't be able to find a single grain of grain from the Imperial Uncle's estate. When the Imperial Uncle opened the door to his study, he saw that the eastern skies were already turning white. He began to ponder. Who should he send? Chapter 375. It was a headache to find the right person to send to the black market. After all, even the head of the black market, Master Lin, had no idea how much grain the Imperial Uncle's estate had in store. They could guess that their boss was from the Imperial Uncle's estate, but they had no proof. They only knew the people who sent them the secret letters and silver, but not a single person from the Imperial Uncle's estate. The person they sent had to know the Imperial Uncle's stock well and be able to make the final call on the Imperial Uncle's behalf. Otherwise, another secret letter exchange would most likely be too late. Tonight was the last day of the deadline. They had to get their hands on the silver by the end of the day. Yesterday, the Ministry of Revenue had come to press them again, and the interest from the loan sharks had already rolled in quite a bit. The Imperial Uncle thought for a long time and finally came up with a good candidate. Back at the black market, Chu Shifeng had snagged a second batch of 10,000 dan of grain from Wu Shu's grain store last night. In the morning, Wu Shu's grain store brought out 10,000 dan of grain with great fanfare for a third round. Because this was the last time, no one wanted to miss out on the perfect opportunity. Many more spectators had gathered than 2 days ago. Many of the big merchants who'd never shown their faces in person had shown up as well. The entire black market was in a frenzy, but no one knew that the Lin clan's grain store was holding its biggest sale since the establishment of the black market. With Long Fei Yi watching over her, Han Yunxi slept until the sun was high in the sky. There were still 4 hours before the effects of the poison wore off, so she lay lazily on the bed with nothing to do. Instead, she began to wander through the detox system's detox space. She'd been very busy recently with one thing or another. She didn't even have time to rest, much less study the pond of poison water in the detox space. This time, she discovered that the pond was filled with poisonous grasses. Some of the poison had fully formed, while others were still growing. As soon as she saw the new poisons, Han Yunxi couldn't help but think of Junie Xie. He was probably suffering from the poison in his shoulder by now. She was certain that Junixia would come to her for the antidote in the end. As long as he dared to come, she would definitely let his other shoulder have a taste of being poisoned. The only thing she was worried about now was that Junixia had seen the little thing before, so he could probably guess the little thing's background. If he leaked this matter, she would be in big trouble. These days, she had been secretly paying attention to this matter. Fortunately, Junixia had not made any moves. Thinking about it, that guy was too busy with the northernly imperial family struggle and the 100 poison sex troubles to take care of her and the little thing for the time being. The detoxification space was very large, but the space that could be used was still very small. Han Yunqi's mind couldn't wander to the dark place. The more she forced herself, the more headache she had. In the end, she could only withdraw. She also didn't know how to develop this space. Anyway, she didn't need so much for the time being. Everything was up to fate. After resting for a while, noon arrived. Han Yunqi got up and went out after touching up her makeup. When she opened the door, she saw that it was empty outside. There was no familiar figure. Where was he? While Han Yunqi was puzzling over this, Long Fei descended from the roof. Originally, he was supposed to be guarding the door, but last night he'd sensed a high-level expert approaching the house. Still, he couldn't find any signs of the intruder after searching around for a long time. In the end, he decided to sit on the roof and keep watch, unable to sleep all night. Han Yunqi only felt relieved when she saw Long Fei Yi. She naturally understood him and asked in a low voice, "Are you tired?" "Not tired." His answer was very simple, but behind this simplicity was his gaze that didn't leave last night. He sat on the roof, guarding and watching all night. After all, he was seriously injured. If an expert really made a move and he wasn't careful, she would be in danger. The servants quickly came to serve them. After eating a full meal, Master Lin personally came to invite them. He smiled and said, "Miss Hellion, the people from the granary are here. Let's talk about the quantity and price." The so-called people from the granary were naturally people sent by the imperial uncle. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi knew what was going on. The two of them exchanged glances and left with Master Lin. Just after they left, a masked man dressed in white appeared out of thin air beside Han Yunqi's bedroom. He was a modest gentleman, gentle as jade. Long Fei Ye's feeling was right. There was indeed an expert nearby. However, he didn't know that this expert followed precisely because he was seriously injured, to protect Han Yunqi. Master Lin brought Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi into a very hidden room. Inside, there was a middle-aged man dressed in blue, wearing a bamboo hat and a light veil covering his face. His entire head was covered. Only a hazy outline could be seen through the white veil. When Han Yunqi and the others entered, he stood up. After a round of introductions, the three of them sat down. Long Fei Yi still stood behind Han Yunqi. The middle-aged man inadvertently glanced at Long Fei Yi a few times. Although this action was behind the veil, it didn't escape Long Fei Yi's sharp eyes. As soon as Long Fei Yi entered, he silently sized up this middle-aged man, from his shoes to the bamboo hat he wore. Finally, his gaze fixed on his hands. When the middle-aged man looked over, he immediately averted his gaze, remaining silent and reserved. "How much grain does Miss Hellion need? Our storehouse master is here. He can directly give you the information." Master Lin spoke first. Han Yunqi teased, "What? Master Lin doesn't even know how much grain is in the storehouse." Han Yunqi's question was normal. If she didn't ask, it would instead make people suspicious. The middle-aged man immediately smiled. "Master, you see, even Miss Hellion said so." Master Lin smiled awkwardly. "Hee, Miss Hellion may not know, but this storehouse master of mine is very reliable. With him here, there won't be a single mouse in the granary." The mouse in these words naturally referred to the people who stole the grain. The middle-aged man immediately became modest. "I am indebted to Master Lin's trust. I will naturally be loyal to my duty." "Master, what did you say your surname was?" Han Yunqi suddenly interjected. "My surname is Qian." The middle-aged man said again. Oh. Han Yunqi nodded. She was actually deliberately probing for fun. Just now, the middle-aged man also said money. It looked like his lie was still a draft. Actually, Whether these two people complimented each other like this on purpose or unintentionally talking about it, she didn't care. Everyone was sitting here. The matter was already more than half done. Now, the only thing left was the price. As for this middle-aged man's identity, as long as he showed himself, Long Fei Yi would be able to find out his background. Master Qian, then tell me how much grain you have in your storehouse. Han Yunqi's attitude was arrogant and casual. We have a lot of grain in our storehouse. No matter how much Miss Helian wants, we have it all. Master Qian's tone wasn't small. Hee, what if you don't have it? Han Yunqi asked again. Master Qian glanced at Master Lin. Master Lin hurriedly said, how much does Miss Helian want? Please give a price. I don't know. However much you have, this lady will take it all. Han Yunqi said and added, cash? When these straightforward words came out, Master Lin and Master Qian were both shocked. Han Yunqi took advantage of the situation and added, of course, if we can't agree on the price, this lady won't take a single grain away. Master Qian hesitated for a moment and said seriously, Miss Helian, why don't you just name a price? Name a price. Han Yunqi wasn't that stupid. She came to bargain, not to quote a price. When she was still a student, she relied on part-time jobs to make a living. Studying medicine was very difficult and very expensive. Many clinical training opportunities had to be fought for with money. Those internships arranged by the school were always limited. What's more, she was partial to detoxification. Therefore, she was especially stingy when it came to buying things and was especially good at bargaining. As the saying goes, buy with mistake and sell with mistake. No matter what she bought, as long as she named a price first, she would definitely be cheated. It's better if Miss Helian named a price. With such a large quantity, this one will see if the price is suitable. Master Qian said with a smile. You also know that the quantity is large. Just name a suitable price. Han Yunqi said very indifferently. In terms of attitude, she won first. Who told the other party to be in a hurry to get rid of it? I heard that Miss Helian complained yesterday that 10,000 taels was too expensive. Master Qian probed, but didn't clearly state how many tons of 10,000 taels. Not expensive? Han Yunqi also asked vaguely. 12,200 dan is indeed expensive, Master Qian said to the point. Han Yunqi sneered. Yesterday, she complained that 10,000 taels was too expensive for 10,000 dan, not 100 dan. This guy did it on purpose. He actually reduced the price from 10,000 dan to 100 dan all of a sudden. Truly ruthless. Aya, did I say that yesterday? Han Yunqi played dumb. Master Lin also played dumb. It seems like you said that. What's the best way to haggle? It's to shamelessly play dumb. Han Yunqi flipped her long hair and turned to look at Long Fei Yi, asking, I drank too much yesterday, did I say that? Reporting to Master, you didn't say that. Long Fei Yi's tone was very professional. Then what did I say? Han Yunqi secretly said in her heart, Your Highness Duke of Qin, please name your price. Reporting to Master, yesterday you said 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan. Long Fei Yi's tone was flat as he replied. When these words came out, Master Lin and Master Qian immediately spat out the tea in their mouths. Both of them were dumbfounded and admitted defeat. 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan. This. He actually said this kind of thing. Not to mention them, even Han Yunqi was shocked. She always thought that she was very ruthless, but she didn't expect that the most ruthless person was Long Fei Yi. Han Yunqi meaningfully said, Oh, and continued, Master Lin. It seems like you misheard. Miss Helian is joking, right? 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan. How is this possible? Master Lin's smile was uglier than crying. You still think this price is low? Then how much are you talking about? Han Yunqi innocently replied. During haggling, if one had to be the first to name a price, then one had to fiercely push the price down to below the standard price. This way, there would be enough room to take advantage of the situation. 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan, this was already set. Han Yunqi wanted to see how much Master Lin could raise it. Chapter 376. No matter who said it, no matter how they said it. Han Yunqi's price was 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan of grain. This price was 10 times lower than Wu Shu's grain shop's price. Han Yunqi calmly drank her tea, waiting for Master Lin and Master Qian to haggle. Master Lin had been doing business in the black market for so many years, but he had never seen someone haggle so fiercely without blushing. No matter how fiercely they haggled, there was a bottom line. Once the bottom line was exceeded, there was only one outcome, and that was to be kicked out by the shop owner. Master Lin flattered Han Yunqi for so long, but in exchange for such a heart-wrenching price, he wanted nothing more than to pick up a broom and scold this woman out. However, he didn't dare. Right now it was a buyer's market, not a seller's market. He was the one begging her to buy, not the other way around. Master Lin kept taking deep breaths, silently telling himself to calm down. It was business, after all, so he had to slowly grind to earn money. Compared to Master Lin, Master Qian was much calmer. He smiled and said, "Miss Hellion, let's not take drunk words seriously, okay?" What did he mean by not taking it seriously? He meant that this price didn't count, and that she should open a new one. Han Yunqi curled her lips, then 200,000 dan, 10,000 taels. This time, the calm Master Qian couldn't control himself. He angrily said, "Miss Hellion, this isn't a place for jokes." Who knew that Han Yunqi also wasn't happy? "Cold," she said. "Who's joking with you? My price is 100,000 dan, 10,000 taels. It's you guys who talk too much nonsense." As Han Yunqi spoke, she looked towards Master Lin and impatiently said, "Master Lin, I've already named the price. How much can you sell it for? If it works, then it's fine. If it doesn't work, then we'll pull it over. In any case, I'm not in a hurry to buy it." If Master Lin and Master Qian knew Han Yunqi's true identity one day, and then remembered what she said today, they would definitely vomit blood and die. However, at this time, they already had no way out. Under the premise that Han Yunqi offers 100,000 dan and 10,000 taels of silver, Master Lin and Master Qian don't know what to do. If they offer a low price, they will suffer a great loss. If they offer a high price, if this woman says she doesn't want to buy and directly leaves, they will cry to death. Both of them were silent and didn't say anything. Han Yunqi didn't care what they were thinking. She didn't want to wait. "Master Lin, it's so hard to do business with you." As she spoke, she casually tossed the teacup aside and got up to leave. "Miss Hellion, please wait a moment." "Wait a moment." Master Qian hurriedly asked her to stay. "Miss Hellion, because there are old and new grains in the granary, we need time to discuss the price." This Master Qian was quite smart. Master Qian had been sent by the imperial uncle himself, so he naturally had full authority to decide the price and quantity of grain on behalf of the imperial uncle. The reason he'd left was to discuss the price and stock with Master Lin. The amount of money that the imperial uncle's estate had to hand over to the Ministry of Revenue, as well as the interest they had borrowed from the black market loan sharks, amounted to a deficit of more than 1,500,000 taels as of tonight. On the other hand, there were more than 3 million dan of grain in storage. Of the 3 million dan, a third was old grain and 2/3 were new grain. Not all of it had been obtained through corruption. Tianing country's harvest this year hadn't been good, so they hadn't been able to hand over much grain. Moreover, the national treasury had a limited amount to spare for disaster relief. Of the 3 million dan, the imperial uncle's estate had used his authority to buy from the rich landlords at a cheap price and hoard them until the price rose. According to Han Yunqi's price of 100,000 dan for 10,000 taels, all of the grain would only be sold for 300,000 taels. How could 300,000 taels be enough for the imperial uncle's estate to hand over to the Ministry of Revenue? After doing some calculations, Master Qian felt more and more clear-headed. He increasingly felt that Miss Hullion's price was ridiculously low. He had no idea how he'd managed to negotiate with Han Yunqi to this extent. After some discussion with Master Lin, he settled on the lowest price in his heart, 100,000 dan for 50,000 taels. 100,000 dan for 50,000 taels. If they sold all of their grain, they'd get 5 million taels in cash, just enough to cover the imperial uncle's deficit. This price couldn't be any lower. If it went any lower, there'd be no point in selling any more grain. Of course, Master Qian hoped that they could sell for a bit more and make a profit. The profit here referred to the surplus after the imperial uncle's deficit was filled. It wasn't a true profit. One had to know that such a large amount of grain would have to be sold for at least 3 million taels in order for the imperial uncle's estate to not make a loss. Setting aside the fact that the imperial uncle's estate had spent real money to buy the grain at a cheap price, even the embezzlement would cost a lot. The cost of personnel, transportation, storage, and so on were all considerable expenses. Some people had large businesses and appeared to be very wealthy, but they often couldn't fork out much cash. This was because the larger the business, the greater the intangible expenses. Of course, Master Qian definitely wouldn't ask for silver if the final price was a profit. He would only keep the grain and sell it when the price rose in the future. That way, he could make up for his losses as much as possible. When she saw that Master Lin and Master Qian had returned, Han Yunxi had an impatient look on her face. She asked, "Master Lin, can you name a price now?" Master Lin didn't even have time to sit down. "Miss Hellion, the price you named is truly too low. We'll lose a lot of money." "If you're losing a lot of money, then don't sell it. We can't let you lose money." Han Yunxi spoke so kindly. Master Lin and Master Qian were secretly complaining in their hearts. Master Lin didn't know how to explain to Han Yunxi why they had to sell the grain. He avoided the topic and sighed. "Miss Hellion, 100,000 Dan for 70,000 taels is already a low price. We have more than 2 million Dan of grain in our storehouse. At this time, you won't be able to find that much grain anywhere." Master Lin said, then added, "Of course, the price isn't that low." As soon as he said this, Han Yunxi knew that 70,000 taels wasn't the other party's bottom line. Because Long Fei Yi had investigated the imperial uncle's deficit before, they had a rough estimate. If 70,000 taels was 100,000 Dan, then 2 million Dan was more or less the imperial uncle's deficit. This group of people would definitely leave some room for negotiation. They wouldn't go so far as to say that they were dead set. Thus, Han Yunxi guessed that the other party's stockpile wasn't just 2 million Dan. She and Long Fei Yi hadn't come here to save money, but for the grain and evidence. Their first goal was to empty out the imperial uncle's stockpile of grain. No merchant could be made without treachery. However, no matter how treacherous a merchant was, they still had a moral bottom line. So many people had starved to death during this famine, yet the imperial uncle's residence still had such a large stockpile of grain. Not a single grain had leaked out. What was the difference between this and murder? If the imperial uncle's residence dared to store even a single grain, then she dared to make sure they didn't leave a single grain behind. "Master Lin, aren't you too good at haggling?" As Han Yunxi spoke, a self-deprecating smile appeared on her face. "No, that's not right. You didn't even want to make this deal. Since you don't have any sincerity, I don't think there's any need for further discussion." As soon as Han Yunxi finished speaking, she stood up and prepared to leave. Master Lin panicked. Just as he was about to speak, Master Qian beat him to it. "Miss Hellion, your price is truly too low. How about you raise it a bit, and we lower it a bit?" "How much can you lower it by?" Han Yunxi stopped in her tracks. "How much can Miss Hellion raise it by?" Master Lin hurriedly asked. Han Yunxi sneered when she heard this. "Will Master Lin accept it no matter how much I raise it?" Master Lin was momentarily at a loss for words. He didn't know how to respond. "Master Lin, it doesn't matter how much I raise it. The key is how much you're willing to lower it. As I said earlier, I can decide whether or not I want to make this deal." Han Yunxi made her stance clear. Master Lin looked at Master Qian, but didn't say anything else. Master Qian was just like Master Lin. He was both mentally and physically exhausted. However, he still wanted to put up a fight. After all, with such a large amount of grain, even a single tael of silver would increase the total by a lot. Chapter 377. Miss Hellion, 60,000. 60,000 is already the lowest price, Master Qian said helplessly. This time, Han Yunxi was very straightforward. 50,000. Forget it if you don't want to sell. 50,000. Master Lin and Master Qian both felt a sense of helplessness. They really wanted to know what kind of deity this girl was. She was actually so shrewd as to know their lowest price as soon as she opened her mouth. 50,000. They had to sell it even if they didn't want to. Master Qian could only pray that the imperial uncle's estate wouldn't vent their anger on him when they found out the price. Thus, the price of 50,000 taels for 100,000 dan was settled. In the end, Master Qian had to add in all the grain in the storehouse to make up for the imperial uncle's deficit. So your storehouse has more than 2 million dan? Han Yunqi's words were full of sarcasm, but unfortunately, Master Lin and Master Qian didn't catch it. Aside from feeling stifled, the two of them were most concerned about the problem of money. After careful calculation, Miss Hellion would have to pay them 1,530,000 taels in cash. They didn't know if she had such a large sum on her. If it was delayed for a day or two, then it would be over. Although it was a cash transaction, a day or two wouldn't be considered a delay. Just as Master Lin and Master Qian were worried that they would have to go through a lot of trouble with this girl, Han Yunqi smiled and said, "Master Lin, one hand for the money, one hand for the goods. This rule is correct, right?" Master Lin and Master Qian both let out a huge sigh of relief when they heard this. Master Lin quickly replied, "Yes, yes. Good. I'll have someone transport the grain. Once they're done, I'll give you the money immediately," Han Yunqi said seriously. Master Lin was frightened. The storehouse wasn't in the black market. The black market only had a small amount of grain stored there. The storehouse was above ground. Who knew how long it would take for them to transport such a large amount of grain to the storehouse? The imperial uncle's estate would have to receive the money by tonight at the latest, and by tomorrow morning at the latest, they would have to hand it over to the Ministry of Revenue. Master Lin hesitated for a moment, then put down his pride and said helplessly, "Miss Hellion, you don't know, but this one is in urgent need of money. Could you first?" Han Yunqi did it on purpose. She hesitated, "But I haven't seen any grain. It's really, Miss Hellion. I can bring you to the warehouse right now," Master Lin said anxiously. Han Yunqi and Long Fei, you were waiting for this sentence. Okay. Han Yunqi readily agreed. Master Lin and Master Qian personally led the way. Before long, Han Yunqi and Long Fei were brought to the black market in the realm of Flame Heaven, where they boarded a horse-drawn carriage. Master Lin personally brought over 2 blindfolded black cloths. "Miss Hellion, I hope you can understand the rules of the underworld. In the black market, no one cared about the source or destination." Master Lin brought Han Yunqi and the others to the warehouse. According to the rules, he did have the right to blindfold them. Han Yunqi was very generous. Just as she was about to raise her head and let Master Lin cover her eyes, Long Fei took the black cloth from Master Lin's hand and personally covered Han Yunqi's eyes. Master Lin didn't dare to say a word at the sight of Long Fei's deep, cold eyes. After Long Fei covered his own eyes, Master Lin went to sit on one side without a word. Han Yunqi and Long Fei really couldn't see a thing with their eyes covered, but Long Fei's guards followed them the entire way. After taking a detour, they finally arrived at their destination. By the time Han Yunqi and Long Fei got off the carriage and took off their blindfolds, they discovered that they were in a forest on the outskirts of the capital city. Han Yunqi assumed that the imperial uncle's granary would be far from the capital, but never expected him to be so bold as to store his stolen grain near the capital. It was probably a form of mockery to Emperor Tianhui. Actually, the imperial uncle's estate used to have granaries in many counties and prefectures. But for the sake of secrecy and management, they'd gathered all the grain in one place. This way, they only needed a single group of people to manage the granary, which meant fewer people knew about its secrets. The granary was built like a manor, so anyone who didn't know better would assume it was some rich family's courtyard in the suburbs. "The two of you, please come inside." Master Lin was very polite, but he was desperate for money. Han Yunqi and Long Fei walked inside and saw that every room was filled to the brim with grain. All of the bags were identical and had no markings on them. In other words, they couldn't find any evidence of where the grain had come from. The two of them walked around the entire manor and did a rough count. There wasn't much difference in the amount of grain. "Miss Hellion, you've seen the goods. Should we?" Master Lin trailed off. Han Yunqi understood and said coldly, "Give us half of the money in cash and the other half after the grain has been transported away." As soon as she finished speaking, the money bags behind her took out their money. Han Yunqi didn't see Long Fei take out his money, or else she would be smitten again. Long Fei elegantly took out a banknote worth more than 700,000 taels from his sleeve and handed it directly to Master Lin. Master Lin looked at Master Qian and didn't know whether to take it or not. Master Qian was also hesitant. This woman's request wasn't excessive. They really should transport all the grain before paying the full amount. However, they were pressed for time. Master Lin? Han Yunqi urged, not giving them any extra time to think. Master Lin couldn't help but complain in his heart. Why didn't this woman come earlier to buy the grain? Even if it was 1 day earlier, it would have been good. Hee. Han Yunqi had calculated the time accurately, so how could she come earlier? Finally, Master Qian made a decision. He said, Miss Helian, how about this? I'll immediately find someone to transport the grain out. You just wait here, and we'll settle the money today. How about it? Han Yunqi pretended to ponder for a moment, then smiled and agreed. That's fine too. Don't know where Miss Helian wants to transport the grain? Master Qian asked again. The Qin family temple in the southern suburbs. You can directly go there. There will be people there to receive you. Han Yunqi and the others had come prepared. This location was precisely the only way to go to the disaster area. This batch of grain was definitely going to be sent to the disaster area. After all the negotiations were completed, Master Qian and Master Lin finally felt relieved. Master Qian also had time to seriously look at the banknote Long Fei gave him. The banknote naturally couldn't be fake. Master Qian looked at the origin of the banknote. He didn't expect that this banknote really came from the Northernly Countries Bank. Because of this, he felt even more relieved. Master Qian led Han Yunqi and the others to sit in the guest hall while calling out a group of professional porters and caravans to transport the grain. In order to fight for time, Master Qian called out almost the entire caravan of porters. Long Fei and Han Yunqi sat in the living room and just happened to be able to see the porters going in and out. Han Yunqi was secretly happy. These porters and caravan drivers were undoubtedly the best witnesses. This transaction was really worth it. Until the middle of the night, they finally transported all the grain to the location designated by Han Yunqi. Long Fei gave the second banknote. It was still a banknote from the Northernly Countries Bank and could be directly withdrawn. After confirming that there was no mistake, Master Qian immediately sent his trusted subordinate to send the banknote to the imperial capital. After rushing for 10,000 miles, they finally made it. Master Qian didn't leave with Han Yunqi and the others. He said goodbye at the entrance of the granary. After all, he couldn't be exposed again. After sending Han Yunqi and Long Fei back to the black market, Master Lin smiled and said, Miss Helian, I hope we can cooperate again next time. Definitely. Han Yunqi replied with a grin. She was in a very good mood. Master Lin was planning to earn back all the silver he'd lost from this woman next time. How could he know that there wouldn't be a next time? Just like that, the business deal ended happily. When they returned to the Wu clan's grain store, Han Yunqi couldn't help but laugh out loud. She reached out a hand towards Long Fei. Your Highness, give me a reward. They'd agreed that if she did the job well, she'd get a reward. Long Fei knew that Han Yunqi could do things well, but he never expected her to do it so well. No one could be a better trap than this woman. If the imperial uncle's estate collapsed one day, it'd definitely be because of this woman. Chu Shifeng, Uncle Wu, and the rest were all present. After learning of the situation, they couldn't help but prostrate themselves in admiration towards Han Yunqi. Of course, right now they were even more curious about what His Highness Duke of Qin would bestow upon esteemed Wang Fei. Long Fei stared at Han Yunqi in silence. Your Highness, you can't act shamelessly. Han Yunqi exclaimed, her good mood written all over her face. Finally, Long Fei spoke up. Your lordship will give you anything you want. Han Yunqi gave a start before she asked timidly, Your Highness, what are you saying? It wasn't that she didn't hear him clearly, but she couldn't react. Your lordship will give you anything you want, Long Fei repeated. His tone was flat, but it was filled with undeniable determination. A word spoken cannot be taken back even with 4 horses. Finally, a smile spread across Han Yunqi's face. What other reward could be more tempting than this? He'd give her anything she wanted? Long Fei, do you know that's equivalent to a promise? Your Highness, aren't you afraid that Chenxia will? Han Yunxi trailed off. What? Long Fei Yi asked indifferently. Aren't you afraid that Chenxia will take all of you? Han Yunxi was quite serious. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi lifted her chin domineeringly and said generously, You really want all of it? Han Yunxi felt a little guilty at his question. She was practically all-powerful in the Lin clan's grain store, but in front of Long Fei Yi, she was always like a little girl. Han Yunxi didn't dare to answer for a long, long time. Finally, Long Fei Yi said, Think carefully before you answer. His all? What did his all include? Including his power, his wealth, his status, his past, his present, his future, and his secrets. Had Han Yunxi ever thought about it seriously? For some reason, Han Yunxi suddenly felt the atmosphere grow heavy. She smiled and said, All right, Chenxia will think it over carefully. Long Fei Yi finally released her and said, When the Ministry of Revenue delivers the money tomorrow, we'll set out for the disaster areas. Originally, the Ministry of Revenue was in charge of the money from the charity auction, but Emperor Tianhui had appointed Long Fei Yi as the imperial envoy for the disaster areas. Thus, the money was returned to Long Fei Yi's hands. In other words, the money that Manager Qian had taken from Long Fei Yi today would go back to Long Fei Yi. If the imperial uncle knew about this, he'd probably be angry enough to bleed from his 7 orifices. That very day, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi settled down in the black market. But the next day, the Ministry of Revenue didn't even deliver the money before bad news arrived. Chapter 378. The money from the Ministry of Revenue hadn't even arrived when Han Yunxi and the rest received bad news. Rumors were spreading all over the country that His Highness Duke of Qin had no way to save the famine victims, so he'd purposely delayed his journey to the disaster areas. This was the hottest topic in the 3 disaster areas. Some even began to slander His Highness Duke of Qin for embezzling the silver from the charity bazaar. Instead of buying food with the money, he'd indulged Qin Wangfei in all sorts of extravagant spending. Han Yunxi's mouth twitched at the news. Aren't these rumor-mongers a little too impatient? There were a total of 7,400,000 taels of silver from the charity bazaar. Of the remaining 5 million taels, Long Fei Yi's own money came from the imperial uncle's estate. He still hadn't sent over half of the silver. Now they were accusing them of embezzling the money? That was an insult to His Highness Duke of Qin. Was it worth it to embezzle 1 or 2 million taels of silver? Han Yunxi didn't know if she should feel unlucky or honored. Fine. She gave Long Fei Yi an open-minded smile and said, Your Highness, Chenxia is a femme fatale. I've harmed the country and its people. Long Fei Yi only glanced at her, disdaining to express his opinion. Han Yunxi's bracelet alone was worth an entire country. Was the 1 or 2 million taels he'd embezzled enough to feed Han Yunxi to eat, drink, and play? Clearly, the people who'd framed him had underestimated his wealth. Although he'd gone to the black markets instead of the disaster areas, he'd sent people to spread false news and fake his whereabouts for Emperor Tianhui to see. Only Emperor Tianhui or the imperial uncle could spread rumors throughout the country in such a short time. Your Highness, isn't that little bit of silver a joke? Who'd believe that? Even Chu Shifeng knew how to calculate the cost. But Wu Shu only said, Your Highness, it'd be great if the common people could tell right from wrong. Rumors are fiercer than tigers. What a vicious move. Uncle Wu's words did not mean to belittle the commoners. It was just that the commoners had limited access to information, and the truth they knew was even more limited. It was human nature to echo the opinions of others. Therefore, no matter how ridiculous the rumors were, they would spread. As they spread, they would become true, and as they spread, they would become history. Therefore, the pen of the literati and the mouths of the commoners were both knives that could kill without leaving a trace. It wasn't a secret that the imperial court hadn't done its best in providing relief, so it was no longer a secret that their grain had been stolen. Under these circumstances, the people of the disaster areas were all dissatisfied with the imperial court. Why would they care about the open and veiled struggles between His Highness Duke of Qin and Emperor Tianhui? In their eyes, His Highness Duke of Qin was the imperial envoy for disaster relief and represented the imperial court. Once the news of the Duke of Qin's corruption continued to spread, there was a high chance that a riot would break out. Hearing Wu Shu's words, Chu Shifeng immediately added, "Your Highness, as this subordinate sees it, their next step will be to incite the disaster victims to revolt." Han Yunxi nodded approvingly. The battle for the hearts of the people had just begun. "Your Highness, according to this concubine's understanding of the 3 disaster areas, South Ning County's situation is the most serious, and the people there are the most ferocious," Han Yunxi said seriously. "You know?" Long Feiyi was surprised. "Qinxia didn't know which region Your Highness was going to go to first, so I did some research," Han Yunxi replied honestly. As expected, this woman was an excellent assistant. Although he hadn't given her any orders, she still took care of everything. Long Feiyi gave Han Yunxi a long look that made Han Yunxi uneasy. "Chu Shifeng, starting tomorrow, conceal all of your lordship's movements. Go to South Ning County in secret and deliver 1.5 million dan of grain there. Split the rest evenly between the other 2 regions and send them all under secret escort," Long Feiyi instructed. Han Yunxi was amused by his words. Long Feiyi was the most treacherous of all. The rumors had already spread like wildfire, but he'd even faked his own movements. Once all of his movements were concealed, even Emperor Tianhui wouldn't be able to find him. Heaven knows what kind of rumors would spread then. Long Feiyi was adding oil and vinegar to his own flames. Without a doubt, he'd draw the attention of the entire nation's citizens onto himself. Under these circumstances, if he personally delivered grain to the disaster areas to clear his name, it'd cause a stir throughout the country. Long Feiyi was an expert at creating momentum, but this time he'd borrowed the momentum of Emperor Tianhui's efforts to create even more momentum for himself. This subordinate understands. This subordinate will do it right away. Chu Shifeng left excitedly. He really couldn't wait to see His Highness Duke of Qin personally deliver grain to the disaster areas. Just the thought of it was enough to make one excited. Still, Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi were completely unperturbed. Long Feiyi personally poured tea for Han Yunxi. Husband and wife didn't speak, but enjoyed the tea in tacit understanding. Wu Shu watched from the sidelines and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. These 2 masters are more two-faced than the other. It's best not to oppose this couple, or else you'll be played to death before you know it. The next day, Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi personally went to the southern suburbs to secretly deliver grain to South Ning Prefecture. Meanwhile, the carriage that had disguised itself as them suddenly vanished without a trace. Very soon, Emperor Tianhui and the imperial uncle received the news. "Your Majesty, His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei suddenly vanished early this morning." The carriage was abandoned by the side of the road, along with their servants, the scout reported. A complicated look flickered past the imperial uncle's eyes. The Duke of Qin, this, no matter what tricks he's playing, he's doomed this time. The disaster victims want grain, not their lives. No matter what the Duke of Qin is playing, it's useless. Emperor Tianhui laughed coldly. It wasn't that Emperor Tianhui was being arrogant, but he was certain that Long Feiyi didn't have enough grain to send to the disaster victims, nor did he have a way to transfer grain. Even Long Feiyi's Jiangnan estate was running low on grain, while the rest of Tianning's grain reserves had either been used up or bought up by grain merchants long ago. This time, no matter how skilled Long Feiyi was or how much silver he had, he wouldn't be able to conjure up such a huge amount of grain. "Your Majesty, this official is only curious as to why the Duke of Qin would disappear at a time like this." The imperial uncle was cautious to begin with, but after handing over the silver yesterday, he grew even more cautious. He had a feeling that the Duke of Qin wouldn't be so easy to deal with this time. "Someone come, spread the news." Emperor Tianhui wasn't worried at all. He was already displeased that the rumors of the Duke of Qin's embezzlement hadn't spread far and wide. This time, he wanted all of Tianning country to boil over the news. For a long time, the 2 words Duke of Qin were inviolable among the civil and military officials, the imperial family, and the common people. This time, he wanted Long Fei to lose all standing and reputation. He wanted him to know that those who made an enemy of imperial power would never have a good ending. The imperial uncle didn't say much. He'd already sold off all the grain he'd embezzled. Although it was a loss, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing to clear it out at a time like this. If Long Fei had gone missing to investigate the embezzled grain, then he'd be able to escape unscathed. Long Tianma sat on one side without a word. Brother-in-law, it's been a while since you've had a drink with Jean. Emperor Tianhui had to be in a good mood to address the imperial uncle as such. Besides Long Fei, he was also happy about Chu Qingge. The Western Zhou Emperor and Western Zhou's Chu clan had already set a wedding date for him. Half a year later, Chu Qingge would arrive for a political marriage. He'd also agreed to make her a noble consort, one rank lower than the empress. For one thing, Chu Qingge was the woman he'd taken a fancy to. For another, she was born in Western Zhou's strongest military estate. Her marriage would be a great help to him. Your Majesty's favor is better than deference. This humble official will accept your wishes. The imperial uncle said respectfully. He secretly shot a glance at the silent Long Tianma, but Long Tianma pretended not to notice. As the crown prince, he should curry favor with his imperial father while he was in a good mood. Unfortunately, Long Tianma wasn't in a good mood either. Imperial father, Akin still has some business to take care of, so I won't disturb you any longer, he said mildly. Any news from General Mu's estate lately? Emperor Tianhui asked. Everything's as usual. Akin just went to the training grounds with the young general yesterday, Long Tianmo replied honestly. Mu Qingwu had been in a bad mood for days because of the betrothal gifts and wedding ceremony. He'd only agreed to see him yesterday. Emperor Tianhui didn't ask any questions, but waved a hand to dismiss him. Long Tianma left just like that, leaving a trace of displeasure in the imperial uncle's eyes. It wasn't easy to stop him even if he wanted to. Not only his own son, but even the crown prince had been taught a harsh lesson by him for the charity auction. The crown prince was the heir apparent while he was a subject, but the crown prince still called him uncle in private. He was the crown prince's only support. If it wasn't for him, the crown prince would never have married Mu Luiyue or turned over a new leaf. Of course, the imperial uncle supported the crown prince not because of their blood relations, but because the crown prince was also the imperial uncle's guarantee for his future. Otherwise, the imperial uncle's estate would be the first to fall as soon as the heir apparent was replaced. The imperial uncle drank with Emperor Tianhui while thinking about Chu Qingge's marriage alliance. Currently, there were only two noble consorts left in the imperial palace. One was noble consort Shui from the imperial uncle's estate, while the other was General Ning's younger sister, noble consort Ning. Once Chu Qingge arrived, the battle for the empress's position would begin. If Chu Qingge became empress and gave birth to an imperial son, the battle for the crown prince might follow. Long Tianma allowed the imperial uncle to ponder all sorts of things while Mu Luiyue annoyed him to the core. Long Tianma wasn't in the right state of mind, because Mu Luiyue had thoroughly annoyed him. As soon as Long Tianma returned to the Eastern Palace, Mu Luiyue came to greet him. Your Highness, you've returned. Chunxia has prepared white fungus, lotus seed, and jujube soup. Your Highness, withdraw. Long Tianma waved his hand impatiently, too lazy to listen. Mu Luiyue's happy expression immediately turned to one of grievance. Your Highness, Chunxia personally boiled it for a long time. Long Tianma didn't bother to reply. If not for the sake of the general's estate, he would have sent this woman to the western mountains to serve his imperial mother long ago. Seeing that Long Tianma was about to leave again, Mu Luiyue couldn't help but chase after him. Your Highness, Chunxia heard about His Highness Duke of Qin's embezzlement too. From what Chunxia knows of Han Yunxi, this matter must be. Long Tianma stopped in his tracks and warned, you don't have the right to talk about the Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei's matters. Next time this crown prince hears something like that, be careful that I don't punish you for interfering with the imperial harem. Chapter 379. With Long Tianma's warning, Mu Luiyue immediately froze in place. She felt so wrong that she wanted to rush over and quarrel with Long Tianma. What did she have to do to satisfy him? These days, no matter how much she tried to curry favor with him, he never even looked her in the eye. She originally wanted to join forces with Long Tianma to deal with Han Yunxi, But who knew that Long Tianma wouldn't even give her a chance? She originally thought that marrying into the Eastern Palace would be a turning point in her life. But who knew that after being married for less than a month, she would be cast aside like an abandoned wife? On the day of her wedding, Long Tianma disappeared before night fell. It was supposed to be a beautiful wedding night, but she was left alone in an empty room, crying alone. That was fine. But who knew that the Empress Dowager didn't send anyone to retrieve the white handkerchief the next day? Thinking back to when Han Yunqi got married, she and her sisters had made a bet on whether or not Han Yunqi would have a white handkerchief. She had even waited with Princess Chongping for Han Yunqi to be humiliated by the Empress Dowager. Who knew that she would end up like this today? The Empress Dowager didn't even investigate her. The Empress Dowager clearly knew that Long Tianma didn't touch her and tacitly agreed to it. For a woman, what could be more humiliating than this? If she had known earlier, she would have listened to her father. She wouldn't have used death to force her father to agree to this marriage. The more Mu Luiyue thought about it, the more wronged she felt. Why was it that Han Yunqi, who had no background at all, was able to obtain His Highness Duke of Qin's favor? The only thing she was thankful for now was that she had a powerful maternal family as her backing. Long Tianma wouldn't really do anything to her. However, Long Tianma was still the heir apparent. One day, he would ascend the throne. At that time, even the general's estate wouldn't necessarily be able to contain him. Thinking of this, Mu Luiyue felt even more insecure. She thought that her last bargaining chip was to have a child, a boy. In the face of someone she didn't like and didn't like her, she had to find ways to beg for a child. Was this Mu Luiyue's retribution? Mu Luiyue hated Han Yunqi all the time. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi had long forgotten her. Cough cough. This wasn't because Han Yunqi was magnanimous and didn't hold a grudge, but because she had already taken her revenge. At this time, Han Yunqi and Long Fei were in the same carriage, transporting more than 5 million dan of grain to the direction of the South Ning Prefecture, the disaster area. The hidden guard brought over the banknotes that the Ministry of Revenue had sent to the Duke of Qin's manor. Although there were only a few banknotes, each banknote had a large face value. There was a total of over 7 million taels. Long Fei was reading the secret letter from the Yu Pavilion and didn't even look at the banknotes. He took them and casually handed them to Han Yunqi. "Your Highness, Chen Xie shouldn't be a femme fatale," Han Yunqi said jokingly. Long Fei was focused on the secret letter and casually said, "This prince can afford to be a femme fatale." Han Yunqi looked at his cold side profile and felt that there was no man more handsome than this guy in the world. Since he had already said so, why should she refuse? She pretended to be serious and said seriously, "Then Chen Xie is relieved." Han Yunqi took the banknotes and secretly handed them to the little hidden guard called Su Donglin the next day, secretly giving him some instructions. Although the accompanying hidden guards all took orders from Han Yunqi only interacted with this little hidden guard, Su Donglin. Needless to say, this Su Donglin was very reliable despite his young age. Han Yunqi wondered if it was time for her to raise some personal guards of her own. It would be best if they were hidden guards who knew how to use poison. Of course, this matter would have to be carefully considered after the disaster relief. They traveled all the way to the disaster area. In order to rush for time, they hurried every night and didn't stay in an inn. The carriage was very large and had a warm bed to lie on. Long Fei and Han Yunqi each lay on one side with a short table in between. During the day, Long Fei was either reading secret letters or reading books. Han Yunqi would occasionally ask him about something, and Long Fei would answer, but he was still focused on the secret letters and books when he answered. Seeing this, Han Yunqi didn't disturb him anymore. When she was bored, she would close her eyes and let her mind wander through the detox system. Fortunately, she brought everything with her this time. She'd prepared a set of all the poisons that Bailey Mingxiang had taken and spent her free time thinking of ways to neutralize them. If all the poisons were mixed together, the detox system would only need a minute to create an antidote. Unfortunately, these poisons weren't just mixed together. They were mixed together in Bailey Mingxiang's special body. Han Yunqi took Bailey Mingxiang's special blood and mixed it with her own normal blood, hoping to create something useful for research. She also brought along the poison orchids she'd found in the poison sect's underground palace, but she didn't have time to think about them for now. Ever since she'd left Long Fei Ye's perplexing butterfly illusion to her, Long Fei Ye hadn't asked about it again. However, she was still very concerned about it. However, Bailey Mingxiang's matter was more urgent than the perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunqi spent a lot of energy wandering through the detox system during the day, so she slept especially soundly at night. Often, she wouldn't wake until the sun was high up in the sky. When she woke up, she'd always find a thin blanket covering her. She was already used to it, so her first reaction was to turn to look at Long Fei Yi. She'd always see his serious profile as he read the scrolls. Sometimes, Han Yunqi would wonder if she'd feel uncomfortable if she didn't see that familiar face when she woke up one day. Today, Han Yunqi woke up very late again. She turned back out of habit and asked, "Your Highness, what are you reading?" "A history book," Long Fei Yi replied indifferently. "Let Chinchia have a look if you're done." "Chinchia is quite bored," Han Yunqi said lazily. Long Fei Yi only made a sound in response without raising his head. He really didn't like to be disturbed when he was reading scrolls. To be more precise, he didn't like to be disturbed no matter what he was doing. Han Yunqi didn't ask any more questions. She got off the carriage to wash up and eat. At this time, Long Fei Yi changed the annals of the 7 noble families in his hands to general history of Cloud Realm. Along the way, apart from paying attention to the Yu Pavilion, Long Fei Yi had been reading the annals of the 7 noble families. He looked through historical materials while sending people to investigate. It seemed like he wanted to find the orphans of the 7 noble families. Meanwhile, Tang Li didn't see the black-robed man at the Yu Pavilion. Long Fei Yi was increasingly puzzled by the identity of the black-robed man. For this reason, he specially sent people to investigate the Mu family in Medicine City and also sent people to find Gu. As for why he wanted to investigate the Mu family in Gu, only he knew. Han Yunqi soon returned with news from one of her guards. "Your Highness, I heard that Western Zhou's Chu clan has prepared 10,000 Fergana colts for Chu Qingga's dowry." Both Western Zhou and Northern Li were rich in warhorses. Their cavalry was their trump card. Western Zhou's warhorses were Fergana horses. They had thin heads and high necks, long limbs, and light steps. They were known for their speed and endurance. Northern Li's warhorses were Mongol horses. They didn't fear the cold and had strong vitality. Moreover, they weren't startled on the battlefield and were incomparably fierce. In terms of overall battle strength, they were superior to Fergana horses. As for Tianning, they didn't have their own war horses, so their cavalry wasn't strong. They were restricted by Western Zhou. It had to be said that 10,000 Fergana colts was a generous dowry. Even Long Fei was surprised by the amount. "What are Western Zhou's Chu clan planning?" he asked. Han Yunqi didn't know much about Western Zhou's Chu clan, but she was clear that Chu Qingga didn't want to marry Emperor Tianhui. While she looked forward to Chu Qingga's marriage alliance, she was also worried about the powerful connections behind the marriage alliance. "Your Highness, could it be that Western Zhou's Chu clan and Western Zhou's Imperial clan?" Han Yunqi didn't finish, but Long Fei Yi understood. Western Zhou's Chu clan was one of the most powerful clans in Western Zhou. The Western Zhou Emperor would definitely be on guard against them, so it was very possible that they were using Chu Qingga to seek outside help. To put it bluntly, if Chu Qingga could become Tianning's empress, then no one in Western Zhou would be able to touch the Chu clan. "Emperor Tianhui will be overjoyed," Han Yunqi said faintly. She even regretted pushing Chu Qingga into Emperor Tianhui's arms. But Long Fei Yi only laughed coldly. "Not necessarily. Great General Ning was in charge of Tianning's cavalry. Consort Ning, one of the 4 noble consorts, was his younger sister. If Chu Qingga wanted to fight for the position of empress, Consort Ning would be a formidable opponent. The relationships here were very complicated." After listening to Long Fei Ye's explanation, Han Yunqi felt the same way. Emperor Tianhui really would have a headache. Han Yunqi had no idea how Chu Qingga's marriage alliance would affect the Duke of Qin's estate. In any case, it would happen in half a year's time. It was better to take care of the matters at hand first. She took out a pile of medicine and gauze from her medical pouch and smiled. "Your Highness, I've changed your bandages. Long Fei Ye's body had always been strong. With her meticulous care, the wound near his heart had healed very well. He no longer needed her to attend to his daily needs. Although Long Fei Yi had said that she'd be waiting on him in the future, the two of them had tacitly agreed to treat it as a joke. Long Fei Yi took off his robes while Han Yunqi sat by his side. She carefully used a pair of tweezers to remove the medicine from his wound, washed it clean with medicine, and rebandaged it. Is it completely healed? Long Fei Yi asked mildly. Han Yunqi replied offhandedly without sparing him a glance. How long will it take for it to heal completely? Long Fei Yi asked next. But Han Yunqi didn't look at him, much less answer him. Long Fei Yi didn't like to be disturbed when he was reading his scrolls. Han Yunqi didn't like to be disturbed when she was changing his bandages either. She kept her head and eyes lowered in concentration. Was there a second person in the world who could ignore Long Fei Yi like this? After changing his bandages a few times, Long Fei Yi had already gotten used to it. He didn't ask any more questions, but stared at Han Yunqi to size her up. He looked at her delicate brows, her high nose, and her tender red lips as if he was examining a treasure in his heart. Of course, when Han Yunqi was done and looked up, Long Fei Yi avoided her gaze. They traveled like this for more than half a month. During this time, news of the Duke of Qin's embezzlement had spread to northern Li and western Zhou. Almost everyone thought that His Highness had absconded with the money. On this day, the carriages stopped at the northern outskirts of South Ning County. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi switched carriages empty-handed and slowly drove into South Ning County. Note to the reader, Little Poison Concubine Group 1 is full. For new students, please add Group 2427780676. Chapter 380. South Ning Prefecture was the largest prefecture in the central region of Tianing Country, and one of the areas hit hardest by the famine. If this was any other time, they'd be able to sense the liveliness and prosperity of South Ning Prefecture from the outskirts. Now, however, the place was filled with a deathly stillness. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi saw nothing but desolation on their way. The soil along the way was so dry that it was cracked. Not a single blade of grass grew, much less grain. The villages they passed by were filled with a deathly stillness, as if they were shrouded in the aura of death. They didn't want to stay a moment longer than they wanted to escape. Generally speaking, most of the places affected by the famine were villages. Those who couldn't afford to buy grain were mostly peasants at the bottom of the food chain. They were usually self-sufficient and rarely had the extra money to buy other kinds of food. If the harvest wasn't good, they wouldn't even have enough grain to pay the landlords for rent, much less keep it for themselves. In the past, it was common to see hordes of famine victims roaming the mountains in search of wild herbs to allay their hunger. It was even more common to see them fight over a single stalk of wild herb. But this time, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi didn't see many famine victims. Occasionally, they'd see a few hungry old people huddled up in front of their houses. South Ning Prefecture was a large prefecture, so the population in the outskirts far exceeded the population in the cities. From what they knew, there hadn't been any mass migration of famine victims because the other prefectures and counties had strictly controlled the area to prevent riots. They didn't allow refugees to enter as they pleased. So why hadn't they seen any famine victims? Were they all hiding in their houses? With these doubts in mind, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi's carriage slowly entered the heart of South Ning Prefecture, South Ning City. A town was a town, where the rich and powerful resided. Even if it looked bleak and desolate, at least order was maintained. Behind the vermilion gates, meat and wine went to waste, while on the roads, bones froze to death. The rich and powerful would never lack for rations. The carriage slowly moved forward. Long Fei Yi was taking a nap with his eyes closed. Han Yunqi looked out of the window and saw that the street was less bustling, but it was still clean and tidy. There were still pedestrians on the road, but there were fewer of them. Although they had changed carriages, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi still did not reveal their whereabouts. Many people passed by the carriage, and some even glanced at it. However, they did not know that the people sitting in the carriage were the imperial envoys sent by the court to provide disaster relief. They were also the most talked about figures in the country, His Highness Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were walking in the direction of the prefectural governor's manor. Who would have thought that as they walked, a carriage would suddenly rush over from the front, causing a commotion on the street. Out of the way. Step aside. Get out of the way. I won't compensate you if you bump into me. Get out of my way. The coachman was a young lad. He waved his whip and shouted arrogantly. The pedestrians on both sides of the street dodged. Many people couldn't dodge in time and fell to the side of the road. Han Yunxi had already poked her head out of the window to watch. She saw that it was a two-horse carriage with 4 wheels coming towards them. The carriage was luxuriously decorated. The curtains were made of pure silk and the 4 corners were decorated with golden tassels. She couldn't see the insignia on the carriage, but from the outside, she could tell that the people in the carriage were either rich or noble. Han Yunxi's carriage slowly moved in the middle of the road without any signs of moving out of the way. The carriage in front of them grew closer and closer, but it didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. It had to be known that the other party was traveling at such a fast speed. If they bumped into them head-on, it would definitely cause a large impact. A car accident was unavoidable, and the consequences could be very serious. This was the first time Han Yunxi had encountered this kind of situation. Needless to say, she was still a bit panicked when she saw the carriage fly towards them as if it couldn't stop. However, when she turned her head to look at Long Fei Yi inside the carriage, her anxious heart immediately calmed down. She saw Long Fei Yi leaning lazily in the carriage with his eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. He didn't take the emergency situation outside seriously at all. After following Long Fei Yi for so long, Han Yunxi had gradually learned a skill. That was, if this man didn't take it seriously, she didn't have to worry about it. Thus, she returned to the carriage and continued to laze around. Long Fei Yi's carriage didn't move, and the carriage in front of them didn't stop either. The distance between the two sides was less than 20 meters, and the surroundings were quickly filled with onlookers. The young coachman of the other side naturally noticed this situation. He drove the carriage at a high speed while asking, "Master, there's a carriage blocking the way. Don't move." An arrogant voice came from inside the carriage. "Dare to block this old man's way? Are you looking for death? Charge over for this young master and see if he'll move." Yes, this little one understands. This coachman couldn't wait for something to happen. He became excited and crazily waved his whip as he sped up. This kind of speed, no matter who it was, they would be scared. He originally thought that the other side's carriage would move aside, but who knew that not only did the other side not move aside, they didn't even put them in their eyes. They still maintained their original speed and drove on at a moderate speed. Gradually, the distance between the two carriages got closer and closer, and the surrounding onlookers trembled with fear. The coachman finally got scared and said anxiously, "Master, they're still not stopping. What should we do?" A young master came out of the carriage. He was dressed in brocade and looked very noble. In such an urgent situation, he wasn't afraid. He glanced at the carriage in front of them and said disdainfully, "Force them to stop. This young master doesn't believe that there's anyone who isn't afraid of death." As he said that, he took the whip and reins from the coachman and drove the carriage himself. He actually sped up and rushed over aggressively. This scene was really thrilling. With this momentum, a collision was inevitable. The surrounding onlookers couldn't take their eyes off of it, afraid that they would miss the scene of the collision. The distance kept shrinking. The young master's expression gradually turned serious and focused, while Long Fei Yi's coachman's expression remained calm. Only 6 meters left. They could all see each other's expressions. 3 meters, they're about to collide. Only 2 meters left. Soon, they're about to collide. If they didn't move aside, it would really be too late. Everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths, waiting to see Long Fei Yi's carriage move aside at the last moment. Who knew that at the most crucial moment, seeing that the carriage was about to collide, Long Fei Yi's carriage still didn't move aside and continued to move forward. Heavens! Both sides' horses were about to collide. Could it be that they were really going to? Suddenly, at this critical moment, the young master suddenly grabbed the reins with both hands. No one knew how much strength he used, but he managed to forcefully turn the horse's head around. The two horses raised their front hooves, and the entire carriage immediately stopped. It tilted back and formed a 90-degree angle with the ground. One couldn't help but praise this young master's driving skills. It was really amazing. In such an urgent situation, he was actually able to stop and didn't flip the carriage. The horses neighed a few times and quickly landed on the ground. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, rejoicing for both sides of the carriage. Many people even praised the young master's driving skills. But the young master was scared out of his wits. His face was deathly pale, and the hand holding the reins was still trembling. One must know that he had rushed over just to force the other side to stop, to force them to move aside. He originally thought that the other side's carriage would move aside at the last moment, but who knew that they actually didn't move aside? He had done too many such things on the road. It had always been others who were afraid of him, but he had never seen anyone who didn't care about their lives. The carriage was right in front of them. Long Fei Ye's coachman had no choice but to stop. The two carriages were really facing each other. Although the young master was scared out of his wits, he quickly became tyrannical. He turned his horse around and faced Long Fei Ye's carriage. He waved his whip and pointed at the coachman, scolding, "Did you not bring your eyes out? How dare you not move aside when you see this young master's carriage?" He didn't care whether the people in the carriage wanted their lives or not. In any case, within South Ning County's sphere of influence, anyone who met him would have to move aside. The consequences of not moving aside were very serious. The surrounding onlookers were frightened and worried for Long Fei Ye's carriage. One must know that this young master was none other than the treasured son of South Ning County's governor, Nangwa Jun. This guy relied on his father's position as the governor of the county. Since young, he had been tyrannical in South Ning County and was privately called the Crown Prince of South Ning County. There was a saying in South Ning County that one would rather offend the governor than offend the governor's son. In the face of Nangwa Jun's arrogance, the coachman was calm and collected. "Young master, this one doesn't know you. Please move aside." As expected of one of Long Fei Ye's men. Even if he was just a coachman, his words and actions were calm and very well-mannered. "Ha ha ha, there's actually someone who doesn't know this young master. This must be your first time in South Ning." Nangwa Jun laughed loudly. "Young master, who you are has nothing to do with this one. My master has important matters to attend to. Please move aside." This was the second time the coachman asked him to move aside. Nangwa Jun's face was filled with disbelief. He looked at the surrounding crowd and laughed loudly. "Did you hear that? He actually asked this young master to move aside." Everyone laughed foolishly. When Nangwa Jun had enough of laughing, he raised his chin and coldly looked over. He sternly warned, "Who was in the carriage? Get out immediately, or this young master won't be polite." Who knew that the coachman still didn't take it seriously and turned to report, "Master, he won't move aside." Under everyone's watchful eyes, Nangwa Jun was completely ignored. He was about to flip out when a low and cold voice suddenly came from the carriage and said two words, "Push aside." Push aside? What did that mean? Nangwa Jun and the others didn't understand. The coachman suddenly raised his whip and whipped the white horse. This white horse seemed to have a mind of its own as it stamped its feet and prepared to charge. After the coachman whipped the white horse a second time, it exploded with astonishing strength and charged forward without caring about the things in front of it. The man didn't react, but Nangwa Jun's horse did. The two horses hurriedly fled to the left and right. Long Fei Ye's white horse charged forward and crashed into the shaft of the carriage with a bang. It actually broke the shaft of the carriage. With the shaft broken, the two horses fled in panic. Nangwa Jun and the coachman fell to the ground, dumbfounded. Only then did they understand what push aside meant. The surrounding crowd was shocked. Nangwa Jun was so arrogant and overbearing, so aggressive, but he didn't dare to actually crash into the carriage. He even braked at the last moment. Who knew that the other party would actually crash into them? Even if they didn't care about the horses or the carriage, they still had to care about their lives. Everyone was still stunned when that cold voice came from the carriage for the second time. "Old Lin, Why aren't you leaving? Chapter 381. The cold voice caused the surrounding temperature to drop several degrees. Even though they didn't see the owner of the voice, everyone couldn't help but feel afraid. They all timidly stared at the tightly closed curtains. The coachman, old Lin, replied, "Not completely. Please forgive me, master." Continue. Long Fei Yi lazily leaned back in the carriage with one hand supporting his head. His eyes were still closed, and he didn't care about what was happening outside at all. Han Yunqi also lazily leaned back, her gaze never leaving Long Fei Yi's silent and cold face. She had a smile on her face the entire time. She realized that she really didn't like the wrong person. This kind of man was too domineering. Continue to crash. Hearing this, Nangwa Jun jumped up from the ground in fright. The coachman followed closely behind. The master and servant didn't even think about it and dodged to the side. One had to know that there was nothing in front of them to block. If they continued to crash, they would definitely be sent flying by the white horse. Looking at that tall horse, just thinking about it made them feel terrified. Just as Nangwa Jun and his servant dodged, old Lin directly drove the carriage over. With a bang, the carriage was smashed into pieces, sending debris flying in all directions. The two masters in the carriage didn't even show their faces. The coachman also didn't turn around. He continued at his original speed, calmly and elegantly driving forward. Everyone was stunned. This was the first time they saw such a domineering person, and also the first time they saw such a domineering and elegant person. Who exactly was inside the carriage? Nangwa Jun looked at the scattered debris and stared blankly for a while before he recovered. He kicked the coachman and immediately roared, "Why aren't you calling people over? Preposterous, preposterous." This was the center of the entire South Ning prefecture. Dispatching people was a matter of minutes. Once Nangwa Jun gave the order, rows of officials rushed out from all directions and surrounded Long Fei Yi's carriage. Seeing the carriage stop, Nangwa Jun swaggered out and fiercely whipped the air. He angrily said, "Listen carefully, this young master is called Nangwa Jun, South Ning Prefecture's young master. You dare to crash into this young master's carriage? You must be tired of living." The coachman, old Lin, was impatient. He coldly said, "Young Master Nangwa, my master is not someone you can afford to offend. Get out of the way." Humph. This young master wants to see just what kind of person this young master can't afford to offend. As soon as Nangwa Jun finished speaking, he waved his hand. More than 10 officers and soldiers from both sides moved forward together, intending to arrest them. Unexpectedly, before they could even get close to the carriage, a slender and fair hand suddenly stretched out from the carriage. The hand was holding a golden token, and on the token was a mighty and domineering Qin character. Seeing this, all the soldiers stopped in their tracks and froze on the spot. Aside from His Highness Duke of Qin, who else would dare to carve the word Qin on a command tablet? Oh my God! His Highness Duke of Qin was in the carriage. His Highness Duke of Qin, who had been missing for so long, had actually come? In an instant, all of the soldiers fell to their knees and cried in unison, "Long live your Highness Duke of Qin." The surrounding crowd quickly followed suit and knelt on the ground. Everyone was shocked and fearful. Nangwa Jun was completely dumbfounded. His legs gave way, and he also fell to his knees. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. The Duke of Qin, forget about him. Even his father, the prefectural governor, couldn't afford to offend him. What should he do? Nangwa Jun was dumbfounded, his mind blank. What should he do? He'd caused a disaster. While everyone was kneeling, Long Fei Yi finally alighted from the carriage. He personally helped Han Yunqi down. Only now did everyone realize that esteemed Wang Fei had come with them. Nangwa Jun really wanted to raise his head and see His Highness Duke of Qin's true appearance, but he didn't dare. He could only kneel in place, trembling. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunqi's hand and walked over to Nangwa Jun step by step. Nangwa Jun was so scared that his head almost fell to the ground. "Can this prince afford to offend you?" Long Fei Yi asked. Nangwa Jun didn't dare answer. He almost cried out, Your Highness Duke of Qin, spare me, spare me. You also know that this prince wants your life? Long Fei asked with interest. Nangwa Jun was scared out of his wits. He repeatedly kowtowed and begged. This lowly one was wrong. This lowly one was gravely wrong. Your Highness Duke of Qin, please spare this lowly one this time. This lowly one truly knows his wrongs. Han Yunqi looked on Nangwa coldly. She hated people with no ambition like this the most. People could be arrogant, but they definitely couldn't lack ambition. Although people like this were loathsome, Han Yunqi still couldn't understand. With Long Fei's personality, he wouldn't waste time on people like this. What was he planning to do? Han Yunqi soon had an answer. Long Fei said coldly, "Your lordship can spare you if you want." But before he could finish, Nangwa Jun hurriedly said, "As long as your highness spares this lowly one will agree to anything. Before the sun sets, give everyone in the city 2 gene of grain," Long Fei said. Nangwa Jun felt like he'd been struck by lightning at these words. He gaped, while the commoners and even the soldiers almost screamed. 2 gene of grain for each person was a beautiful dream at the end of a famine. Southning Prefecture was a disaster area, but the provincial governor would definitely be able to get his hands on grain. For one thing, the provincial governor's estate would definitely have grain stored up, and so would the minor officials in the various towns and villages. These grains were either used to exploit the peasants or sent down by the corrupt imperial court for disaster relief. Amidst their excitement and surprise, the commoners began to question the rumors from before. They all said that His Highness Duke of Qin had embezzled and abandoned the disaster victims. But they'd seen and heard things with their own eyes. His Highness Duke of Qin had forced the provincial governor to spit out his embezzled grain on his first day in Southning Prefecture. Who among Tianing civil and military officials had such ability and boldness? What? You can't do it? Long Fei said as he elegantly raised his foot to step on Nangwa Jun's head. This action was full of humiliation and simply went too far. If this was any other time, everyone would think that His Highness Duke of Qin was being unreasonable and bullying. But right now, the commoners and even the soldiers who'd been bullied by Nangwa Jun were all secretly cheering in their hearts. Many of them even hoped that His Highness Duke of Qin would stomp harder. With his life at the mercy of another's foot, Nangwa Jun wouldn't dare say no, even if he had the gall to do so. Your Highness, this one can do it, can do it. This one will do it right away. Nangwa Jun didn't think too much. In any case, he knew that there weren't many people in the city. If each person was given 2 gene of grain, his father would definitely be able to get his hands on it. A few months ago, the National Treasury had distributed a large batch of grain to Southning Prefecture. The higher-ups had embezzled some of it, and so had his father. The remaining third had been distributed from the provincial governor's estate to the various counties and villages, where some had been embezzled. If his father didn't have enough grain on hand, he could ask the leaders of the various counties and villages for more. What if you can't hand over the grain before sunset? Long Fei asked. The crowd was deathly silent. Everyone subconsciously stood on His Highness Duke of Qin's side, waiting for Nangwa Jun's answer. They were afraid that they'd miss a single word. After all, this concerned everyone's rations. If I can't do it, your Highness can punish me however you want. Nangwa Jun hastily promised. How will you punish me? Long Fei asked again. Nangwa Jun thought for a moment, then said, I'll pay with my life. How much is your life worth? Long Fei asked again. To the side, Han Yunqi, who'd been keeping her composure this entire time, was bewildered. Long Fei had always been a man of few words, so why was he spouting so much nonsense today? What did he want to do? Nangwa Jun also knew that his life wasn't worth much in front of His Highness Duke of Qin. After some thought, he simply said, and my father's life. As soon as he said this, Han Yunqi immediately understood. Long Fei's target was the prefectural governor. She chuckled. Nangwa Jun, you're truly rebellious. What kind of son would use his father's life to make a promise? Unexpectedly, Nangwa Jun actually spoke with righteous indignation. To reply esteemed Wang Fei, It's the father's fault for not teaching his son well. This humble one has committed such a grave mistake today precisely because my father neglected to teach him. Thus, my father must bear the main responsibility. As soon as he said this, Han Yunshi almost burst out laughing. Who knew if Nangwa prefectural governor would be angered to death if he heard this? Your Highness Duke of Qin, I beg of you, please let this humble one go. This humble one will immediately go look for rations. Nangwa Jun was anxious. If he was stepped on again, even breathing would become difficult for him. After discussing the terms, Long Fei finally released Nangwa Jun. Nangwa Jun practically scrambled to escape. Although he left, many of the soldiers didn't want to leave. Like the commoners, they surrounded Long Fei and Han Yunshi. Someone suddenly shouted, "Your Highness Duke of Qin is wise and brilliant. His Highness Duke of Qin has come to save everyone." In a flash, everyone agreed and fell to their knees in unison as they cheered loudly. Actually, the commoners weren't stupid, but kind and pure. They didn't have high demands and only cared about the most basic needs of food and clothing. They believed the rumors, but they only cared about food and clothing. They didn't have any ill intentions. They would be deeply grateful to anyone who treated them well and gave them the most basic guarantees. As Han Yunshi stared at their simple faces and expectant eyes, she felt both gratified and pressured. She turned back to look at Long Fei, only to see a resolute glint in his eyes. She knew that Long Fei was definitely going to take care of the disaster relief. This was Tianning's coldest and most ambitious king who wanted to conquer the world. His heart was very, very big, but it also contained the most unremarkable commoners. As she looked at Long Fei's cold profile, Han Yunshi suddenly felt a sense of anticipation. She was looking forward to the day when this man would take control of the country and rule over the world. Long Fei and Han Yunshi didn't go to the senior provincial official's estate, but stayed at an inn instead. News of Nangwa Jun's death quickly spread throughout the entire South Ning prefecture, including the districts outside the city. The senior provincial official had long since received the news. Slap. A loud and clear slap resounded through the entire mansion. Nangwa Jun was slapped to the ground by his father. Unfilial son. Beast. Stupid pig. Trash. The senior provincial official kicked him, so angry that his neck had turned red. If this wasn't his only son, he would have cut him down long ago. He never thought that he'd give birth to such a stupid thing. This was simply retribution. Although Nangwa Jun was frightened by his father, he still talked back. "Father, how was I supposed to know that His Highness Duke of Qin would come? Didn't I already say he went missing?" "You're still talking." The senior provincial official slapped him again. He was so angry that he wanted to kill himself. His Highness Duke of Qin's disappearance was just a rumor spread by the higher-ups. His Highness Duke of Qin had come to provide disaster relief this time. If he couldn't buy food, he would definitely investigate the corrupt officials and bring back the embezzled food for disaster relief. At this critical juncture, anyone who offended the Duke of Qin would have to die. The senior provincial official didn't want to waste any more words with his stupid son. He had no choice but to consider another matter. The imperial uncle's estate had long ago sent someone to find him to discuss a major matter. He hadn't agreed at first, but now it looked like he had no choice but to agree. Chapter 382. His Highness Duke of Qin had asked Nangwa Jun to distribute 2 jin of grain to everyone in the city before sunset. It was currently noon, which meant there were only 6 hours left until sunset. Official Nangwa dearly wanted to give Nangwa Jun a good beating, but he didn't have time. He had to think of a solution as soon as possible. Otherwise, His Highness Duke of Qin's personality might make him and his father suffer as soon as sunset arrived for all the officials in the disaster areas to see. Logically speaking, official Nangwa should pay respects to His Highness Duke of Qin as soon as he arrived at Nangwa Prefecture. But after such a major incident, official Nangwa had no idea what to do. How could he dare to go? "Someone come. Keep an eye on this unfilial son for old man. Don't let him take a single step out of the gates." Official Nangwa left behind these vicious words before hurrying out of the estate. He went to a hidden residence not far from the senior provincial official's estate, where the official sent by the imperial uncle's estate was staying. As soon as Emperor Tianhui ordered the Duke of Qin to go to the disaster areas, the imperial uncle's estate had sent someone here in secret. This person was none other than Official Yu from the Ministry of Revenue, who was in charge of managing the grain distribution. After the famine broke out, Official Yu had been ordered to investigate the distribution of grain in the disaster areas. Logically speaking, Official Yu was supposed to clean up the corrupt officials below him, but he'd embezzled from his own people to help the imperial uncle's estate get plenty of grain and falsified accounts. Under these circumstances, he could turn a blind eye to the corrupt officials below him. As long as they didn't go too far, he wouldn't pursue the matter even if he had evidence in his hands. After all, the upper echelons of the government were no longer upright. In order to seal the mouths of his subordinates and send in reports of impeachment, he'd have to give them some benefits. Besides, Official Yu didn't just take bribes from the imperial uncle's estate. Many people in the disaster area had also given him benefits. Official Yu lived in South Ning Prefecture, so Official Nangwa naturally worshipped him like a bodhisattva. No matter what Official Yu asked for, Official Nangwa was the first to satisfy him. However, there was one thing that Official Nangwa had yet to agree to. Today, Official Nangwa had hurried to his door precisely for this matter. Official Yu was just about to leave when Official Nangwa arrived. Hee, Official Nangwa, you came at the right time. Look what your good son has done. This official was just about to go look for you. Official Yu said angrily. Official Nangwa had a helpless expression on his face. Official Yu. This lowly official didn't even have time to pay his respects to His Highness Duke of Qin before rushing over to discuss this matter with you. Official Nangwa scooted closer and whispered in Official Yu's ear for a long time. Official Yu listened intently until a satisfied smile appeared on his face. In the end, Official Yu was overjoyed. He chuckled and said, "Excellent, excellent. Let's split up. Once we're done, this official will definitely report to the higher-ups. You're transferred to the imperial capital. It won't be long now." After bidding farewell to Official Yu, Official Nangwa hurried to the inn where Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi were staying. Even in the teeth of the storm, Long Fei Yi was still generous enough to reserve the most luxurious inn in South Ning Prefecture. Before there were rumors of his corruption, he'd always been this extravagant. When he didn't need to hide his identity or whereabouts, he had very high standards for food, clothing, housing, and transportation. When Official Nangwa arrived, Long Fei Yi was drinking tea with Han Yunqi in the second-floor lobby. As soon as he reached the staircase, Official Nangwa led the officials behind him to kneel and kowtow. This official, Nangwa Mingda of South Ning Prefecture, greets Your Highness Duke of Qin. May Your Highness live thousands and thousands of years. May Your Highness live thousands and thousands of years. May Your Highness live thousands and thousands of years. You may rise, he coldly said after a few glances. You may rise. This icy voice was enough to make everyone present tremble. The other officials didn't even dare to look at him. After they rose, they all lowered their heads and waited in place, trembling with fear. Official Nangwa was also apprehensive. He bent at the waist and hurried forward. This official came late to receive Your Highness and caused my unfilial son to offend Your Highness. This official asks for Your Highness' forgiveness. So, you father and son don't plan on giving out grain? As Long Fei Yi spoke, he turned to look at Official Nangwa. When Official Nangwa met those cold, emotionless eyes, he immediately shivered and hurriedly lowered his head. His heart was filled with fear, and he didn't dare look at him again. He'd always heard that His Highness Duke of Qin was a cold and emotionless person. His methods were vicious, and he never showed mercy to anyone. Now that Official Nangwa saw it with his own eyes, he somewhat regretted agreeing to Official Yu's request. However, he was already at the end of his rope. Now that the arrow had been knocked, he had no choice but to release it. This official doesn't dare. This official will do his utmost to carry out Your Highness's orders. This official will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Official Nangwa hurriedly expressed his stance. Then go. Long Fei spoke as he looked out the window. It's getting late. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin's frosty profile, official Nanghua almost wanted to retreat for a moment. However, for the sake of survival, for the sake of fighting for that last sliver of hope, he braced himself and persisted. He feigned a troubled expression and said helplessly, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, there are a total of 23,000 people registered in the city. If each person has 2 jin of grain, that's more than 40,000 jin. Not to mention the current disaster, this official wouldn't be able to gather so much grain even in a normal year." "You mean to say that this prince is deliberately making things difficult for you father and son?" Long Fei asked. Han Yunqi calmly sipped her tea on the side as she watched Long Fei abuse people. Official Nanghua was so scared that his forehead was covered in sweat. He hurriedly explained, "This official wouldn't dare. It's just that the amount of grain is too large. This official is powerless. Your Highness Duke of Qin, please judge clearly." "You mean to say that this prince has been played by your son?" Long Fei asked again. Han Yunqi almost spat out her tea when she heard this. Official Nanghua was so frightened that he fell to his knees with a thump. "My son wouldn't dare. Your Highness misunderstands. My son doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth," and spoke wildly, offending Your Highness. "This official has come to apologize to Your Highness. Your Highness, please forgive this lowly one's transgression. Please spare my son this once." At this time, Long Fei finally looked him in the eye and said sternly, "Nanghua Mingda, the 20,000 people in the city are all waiting for grain. Now you're telling this prince that you can't hand it over? Teach this prince how to explain this to the people." Official Nanghua fell silent, not knowing how to respond. At this time, Han Yunqi sighed softly. "Your Highness, official Nanghua really can't hand over that much grain. As this concubine sees it, just do as Nanghua Jun says and pay with his life. 2 lives to quell the resentment of 20,000 people. Heh, it's worth it." Official Nanghua's heart trembled at these words. Just a moment ago, he had been thinking of retreating, but now he was determined to fight official Yu to the end. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness, please spare my life. Spare my life. This official will immediately go and transfer the grain. This official will do his best." After leaving the inn, official Nanghua felt that his breathing had become much smoother. He had only come here to put on a show. Of course, he would still transfer the grain. If he didn't, how could he continue the show? Tonight, there would be a good show to watch in Southning City. Long Fei and Han Yunqi stood side by side at the window, watching official Nanghua's departing figure. "Your Highness, this prefectural governor isn't stupid enough to really transfer the grain, right?" According to Han Yunqi's understanding, the prefectural governor was a high-ranking official. Chapter 383. Han Yunqi had been pondering Long Fei's suspicions the entire time. "Your Highness, there has to be a trap somewhere." Han Yunqi was certain. Before Nanghua Mingda had arrived, she'd asked the guards and found that Southning City's 4 main gates were still open. There was no way the disaster victims had been locked up outside the city walls. They'd suspected that the victims might be begging for grain on their way here, but that didn't seem to be the case now. Could it be that the disaster victims had been controlled? It was normal for imperial envoys to miss the victims while patrolling the disaster areas. Normally speaking, the local officials would arrange their itineraries and routes ahead of time, so there was no need to chase away the victims. Even if they didn't arrange the routes beforehand, the local officials had plenty of ways to chase the victims to places they couldn't see. But news of Long Fei's corruption had spread like wildfire. Even if official Nanghua wanted to hide the disaster victims, his superiors wouldn't agree. They'd definitely use the victims to make trouble and embarrass Long Fei. Long Fei and Han Yunqi were still lost in thought when Chu Shifeng arrived. Smiling, he said, "Your Highness, I have 2 pieces of news, one good, one bad." "All right," Chu Shifeng obediently told him the news. He didn't have the guts to let His Highness Duke of Qin choose between the good and bad news first. "Your Highness, the The good news is that a messenger pigeon has just arrived. The grain from the other two disaster areas has all arrived without anyone noticing. Right now, they're all waiting outside the disaster areas for your orders. Half of the 3 million dan of grain that Long Fei Yi had scammed from the imperial uncle's estate were waiting outside South Ning City in secret. The other half had been divided equally between the other two disaster areas. Now that they'd arrived, they were only waiting for Long Fei Yi's orders to enter the city and distribute the grain. Long Fei Yi had come to distribute grain, and more importantly, to arrest the corrupt officials. Even though they had scammed a lot of grain from the imperial uncle's estate, there were even more disaster victims. There was a limit to the amount of grain that could be distributed to each disaster victim. It was hard to say if they could even last until next month, let alone survive through the winter. It was already early winter, and in 2 months, it would be December. At that time, it would be freezing cold, and there wouldn't even be any wild herbs. Who knew how the disaster victims would survive? Therefore, official Nangwa's considerations were correct. If His Highness Duke of Qin couldn't get the grain, he would definitely target the corrupt officials and force them to spit out all the grain they had eaten. Seeing that his master only nodded without giving orders, Chu Shifeng hastened to tell him the bad news. In an instant, everyone stepped aside and respectfully opened up a path that was even wider than the one they'd given Long Fei Yi. Official Nangwa personally directed the carriages and didn't forget to remind the driver to be careful and not to hurt any passers-by. It had to be said that his amiable image was far too different from his son's image of speeding on the road this morning. It was especially pretentious. Carriages after carriages of grain were transported out of the alley. Everyone was excited to see this, but, not long after, the convoy was cut off. Official Nangwa had only brought 10 carriages of grain. Each carriage had 8 caddies, so it was only 80 caddies. Long Fei Yi watched all of this without saying a word. Soon, the people began to panic and talk among themselves. Is this all the grain? Is it enough to share? Isn't everyone supposed to get some? Is it 2 caddies? They said 2 caddies this morning. At first, they were just discussing the amount of grain, but someone suddenly shouted, "Everyone, don't panic. His Highness Duke of Qin will definitely do what he promised." Immediately, the crowd shifted their attention to Long Fei Yi. Right. His Highness Duke of Qin promised. Everyone, please calm down. His Highness Duke of Qin is an imperial envoy. He'll definitely give everyone what he promised. His Highness will definitely find a way to get grain. If Han Yunxi was here to hear this, she'd definitely roll her eyes. These people were too good at bullshitting. It was clearly Nangwa Jun who promised, so why did it suddenly become Long Fei Yi's promise? Unfortunately, she wasn't present at the scene. Only Long Fei Yi was present. Even Chu Shifeng wasn't present. Long Fei Yi was dressed in brocade robes as he stood on the steps of the senior provincial official's estate with his hands clasped behind his back. Despite the discussions below, he remained lofty and unmoving, as steady as Mount Tai. His icy gaze rested on official Nangwa the entire time. Official Nangwa put on an act as he supported the carriage full of grain all the way to the gates of the senior provincial official's estate. He was panting for breath, but had no time to rest. He quickly bowed and said, "Good luck to your Highness Duke of Qin. This official came late in order to find grain. I hope your Highness will forgive me." At this moment, all the discussions stopped abruptly. Everyone's attention was focused on this. Although the people at the back of the line wanted to get closer to see what was going on, so far, everyone was still very orderly. No one cut in line to fight. "How much grain did you find?" Long Fei Yi's icy voice chilled the air. "To reply, Your Highness, this official personally went out of the city this afternoon and found a total of 80 dan of grain. Combined with the 100 dan of grain from the senior provincial official's estate, we have 180 dan in total." Official Nangwa knocked on the door as he spoke. The doors to the estate opened, and a few burly men carried out the dan after dan of grain. The crowd grew even quieter at the mention of over 1,000 jin. Over 1,000 jin wasn't a small amount for a single person or a family. But to the 20,000 people in the long line, It was a number that would make them cry on the spot. How much would one person get if more than 20,000 people were to divide it among themselves? Not even a single meal. Soon, the crowd began to feel uneasy and whispered among themselves. However, no one dared to raise their voices. After all, His Highness Duke of Qin hadn't spoken yet. Nangwamingda, are you trying to take advantage of this prince's inability to count? Or are you trying to take advantage of the 20,000 people here? Long Fei asked angrily, which silenced the entire crowd. Nangwamingda immediately fell to his knees. Your Highness Duke of Qin, please spare my life. There are 20,000 people in South Ning City. If each person has 2 jin of grain, that's over 40,000 jin. No matter how capable this official is, I can't find that much grain. As Nangwamingda spoke, he raised his voice and said, Your Highness, this humble official brought all of this food from the various yamen. It's the food that the imperial court left for the yamen to feed the officials and soldiers. Currently, this official has emptied all of the yamen's grain reserves in the 4 counties and 8 townships under South Ning Prefecture's jurisdiction. All of the prefectural governor's estate's grain is also here. This official is truly powerless. If your Highness Duke of Qin still thinks this isn't enough, then you can take this official's life. My son is the only descendant of the Nangwa clan. I beg your Highness to spare him on account of his youth and ignorance. Nangwamingda spoke eloquently, tears streaming down his face. When he finished speaking, he turned to kneel before the crowd. Everyone, I, Nangwamingda, am the magistrate of South Ning Prefecture, yet I can't even protect a single mouthful of grain for everyone. I am truly ashamed of myself. The word protect was rather interesting, as if it was hinting at something. The common people had heard so many rumors. Some were about the Duke of Qin's embezzlement, others about the prefectural governor's embezzlement, and others about minor officials' embezzlement. However, they didn't know which rumors were true and which were false. Seeing Nangwamingda's mournful appearance and hearing that he was willing to give up his own life, many people began to question the rumors about Nangwamingda's embezzlement. Perhaps everyone had misunderstood this magistrate. At this critical juncture, it was already quite good that he was willing to contribute the grain reserves of the various yamens and prefectural governor's estate. In the end, the common people were still soft-hearted. At this moment, someone in the crowd shouted, Official Nangwa, you can't die. Official Nangwa has already done his best. It's not Official Nangwa's fault that we can't find any grain. As soon as these words were spoken, a manservant rushed out of the prefectural governor's estate and knelt before Long Fei Yi in tears. Your Highness Duke of Qin, please spare my life. Please spare Official Nangwa. Official Nangwa even took out the grain he gave to his old mother. There's not a single grain left in the estate. As soon as these words were spoken, the common people broke out into discussion. Nangwamingda had unexpectedly become the target of their sympathy and even respect. This Chapter 384. Indeed, public opinion could be manipulated. Because of the first sentence from the prefectural governor's manservant, more than 20,000 commoners became agitated. At this moment, several people in the crowd of more than 20,000 people shouted loudly from different directions. Official Nangwa didn't embezzle any grain. Where would he find so much? Your Highness Duke of Qin, please spare Official Nangwa. Official Nangwa is devoted to the commoners and even took out his mother's grain. That's right. Please spare Official Nangwa, Your Highness Duke of Qin. Everyone, let's beg Your Highness Duke of Qin. Gradually, the voices begging for mercy for Nangwamingda grew louder and louder. Those who didn't want to beg for mercy for Nangwamingda had no choice but to keep quiet or shout with the rest. Soon, quite a few people knelt and begged. Long Fei Yi was fighting for food for the commoners, but in the end, it became the commoners begging for mercy for Nangwamingda. It had to be said that this was Nangwamingda's ability. What skill! Long Fei Yi was like a bystander in the face of all this. He lowered his head and looked at Nangwamingda, who was kneeling at his feet, with a trace of disdain on his lips. How could Long Fei Yi care about such methods? Nangua Mingda didn't dare to look up at Long Fei Yi. He kept his head down and his astute eyes darted around a few times before he hurriedly looked at the commoners. He raised his hands. Everyone, quiet down. Listen to me. Needless to say, he was quite daring. As soon as he spoke, everyone quieted down. Everyone, today, to have all of you plead for mercy for me, I, Nangua Mingda, didn't become the governor for nothing. It was worth it. If I die by Emperor Qin's sword today, I will die without regrets in front of everyone. There's only one thing I can't let go of. If I leave, who will ask for grain for everyone? Hearing these words and seeing Nangua Mingda's solemn expression, the crowd couldn't help but feel sorrowful. Many of them even revealed expressions of reluctance. Official Nangua really cared about the commoners at all times. Nangua Mingda continued to speak loudly. To be honest, only 2,000 dan of the imperial court's food was distributed to South Ning County, which is what was distributed to the victims in the suburbs last month. Everyone knew that there was very little food for the disaster relief, but they didn't know that there was so little food here. Once these words were spoken, there was an uproar. No wonder official Nangua hadn't distributed any rations. It turned out that he had his own difficulties. Everyone, listen to me. Please don't plead for me anymore. As everyone's official, I, Nangua Mingda, am willing to die to atone for my crimes. I only ask that Your Highness Duke of Qin take pity on the tens of thousands of people in South Ning Prefecture and give us more food. Reporting, a large number of disaster victims have broken through the city gates in the western part of the city. They're out of control, and they're shouting for Your Highness Duke of Qin to distribute the food. Reporting, more than 4,000 disaster victims are rioting in the eastern part of the city. The soldiers are unable to stop them, and they're already rushing this way. Without a doubt, official you had rushed over to cooperate with Nangua Mingda. A sinister smile flitted across Nangua Mingda's lips. He stood up. Guards, protect His Highness Duke of Qin. It would have been better if he hadn't said this. As soon as he did, someone in the crowd immediately shouted, "You can't let His Highness Duke of Qin leave. His Highness Duke of Qin must give everyone an explanation." Voices of agreement rose from all around. His Highness Duke of Qin can't leave. His Highness Duke of Qin can't leave without seeing the food. Your Highness Duke of Qin, didn't you use all the silver from the charity auction to buy food? Your Highness Duke of Qin, the National Treasury sent so much food. Where did it all go? The common people haven't seen a single grain. The 20,000 or so people were thrown into chaos. They surged forward in agitation. Someone let go of the fence, and a group of people rushed in from behind. They blocked the gates of the governor's estate and trapped Long Fei Yi in the center. Pleas for food, protests, and questions rose and fell. Soon, countless disaster victims poured in from all four sides of the city gates. These disaster victims were organized and had been incited long ago. They were even more agitated, indignant, and frenzied than the 20,000 people present. They all rushed forward without any regard for their lives. Their shouts were no longer polite, but direct questions. Your Highness Duke of Qin, rumor has it that you embezzled the money from the charity auction and didn't use it to buy food. Is it true? Your Highness Duke of Qin, take out the food for everyone to see. Didn't you come to provide disaster relief? Why didn't the Imperial Envoy bring any food? Where's Qin Wangfei? Where's that troublemaker? Did Qin Wangfei spend all the money from the disaster relief? Your Highness Duke of Qin, where's the food from the Imperial Court? Where did it all go? You have to give everyone an explanation. The situation had completely spiraled out of control. There were even stampedes in several places. Nangua Mingda ordered the soldiers to form a circle with their spears, separating the people around them and forming the last line of defense. At this time, he put on a helpless expression. Your Highness, say something to everyone. How about this? How about what? Long Fei Yi countered. He was indifferent to the accusations of the crowd. His cold gaze swept over the people around him. So the disaster victims he'd been unable to see were all here. They'd all come. When that happened, Emperor Tianhui could issue orders to thoroughly investigate His Highness Duke of Qin and strip him of his title of Qinhuang to quell the people's anger. Thinking up to here, Official Yu grew excited and decided to give the Duke of Qin another push. He shot a look at one of his guards, who immediately threw himself at Long Fei Ye's sword. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, where's our grain?" Riding on a tall horse, she looked down on the crowd like a queen on an inspection tour. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, she was noble, elegant, and inviolable. This woman was none other than Qin Wangfei, Han Yunxi. "It really is grain. Esteemed Wangfei, that must be esteemed Wangfei. Esteemed Wangfei is here to deliver grain to everyone. So much grain. So much grain." As the convoy gradually drew closer, the refugees all became excited. They danced with joy and joy. One had to know that what Qin Wangfei was escorting over wasn't anything else. It was food, it was hope, and it was their lives. There was no incitement or pretense. Soon, large swathes of refugees fell to their knees and shouted, "Long live His Highness Duke of Qin! Long live esteemed Wangfei!" In the end, everyone was kneeling. It was not hard to imagine how magnificent the scene of tens of thousands of disaster victims kneeling in the streets and alleys of the city would be. Official Nangwa stood rooted to the spot, staring at the carriages of grain. He couldn't believe his eyes. How was this possible? Even if His Highness Duke of Qin had more grain, where would he get it from? Besides the imperial uncle's estate, who else in the world could take out so much grain? But there was no way the imperial uncle's estate would sell grain to the Duke of Qin. Official Nangwa was stunned. Official Yu was so shocked that his entire body stiffened and he couldn't move. Even when everyone around him was kneeling, he still stood there in a daze, unable to recover his wits. How was he supposed to believe his eyes? This had to be a dream. Han Yunxi successfully delivered the convoy amidst the grateful kneeling crowd. She jumped off her tall horse and tidied her clothes before ascending the high steps of the governor's estate. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this concubine has not failed her mission. 1,500,000 dan of grain have all been delivered. Please accept it." Han Yunxi's voice wasn't loud, but everyone present heard her clearly. 1,500,000 dan. Heavens, no wonder there were so many carriages transporting grain. Who would have thought there would be so much grain? 1,500,000 dan of grain was enough to feed all the refugees in South Ning Prefecture for 2 to 3 months. The cheers and cries of gratitude from the commoners grew louder and louder. Wave after wave, the sound was indescribably deafening. At this moment, they only knew that they had grain. They had real grain, grain that they could see with their own eyes. As for those rumors, they had long since forgotten about them. His Highness Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei were their great benefactors. How could they be corrupt? Someone else had to be the culprit. His Highness Duke of Qin had to be here to arrest the corrupt officials. "Official Nangwa, why don't you go make an inventory?" Long Fei spoke up. Not only had His Highness Duke of Qin not embezzled the relief money, he hadn't embezzled the relief food either. Nangwa Mingda, the so-called parental official, was the biggest parasite. What did he say about taking out his mother's rations? That was a complete lie. Very soon, Chu Shifeng's guards carried out sack after sack of grain. Soon enough, they formed a small mountain by the gates. Han Yunxi frowned as she watched. How many elderly and children had starved to death in the disaster area? Yet, these people had stockpiled so much food and waited for the price to rise. I really don't know why these people are so ruthless. This Nangwa Mingda, even dying 100 times wouldn't be enough to atone for his crimes. Nangwa Mingda remained kneeling amidst the angry curses of the crowd, his entire body trembling. He kept shooting glances at Official Yu, but the man couldn't even protect himself right now, much less Nangwa Mingda. Official Yu not only didn't protect Nangwa Mingda, but hit him while he was down. Nangwa Mingda, this official trusted you wrongly? I never expected you to be this kind of person. South Ning Prefecture suffered the most from the disaster and received the most grain. I never expected you to do such a thing. How can you face the common people? Official Yu asked sternly. Official Yu, Nangwa Mingda was about to explain himself when Official Yu beat him to it. Official Nangwa, you're also a man with an old mother and young grandchildren. How could you bear to see so many elderly and children starve to death? Just what is your heart made of? His words sounded good, but after careful consideration, they felt a little strange. The bystanders didn't understand, but Nangwa Mingda knew full well that Official Yu was using his old mother and young grandchildren to blackmail him. He had the data on the actual grain that Official Yu had sent to South Ning Prefecture. Although he had embezzled, the grain that had been sent to South Ning Prefecture had already been embezzled once. Official Yu's intention was for him to shoulder all the blame and not implicate the people above him. Although Nangwa Mingda was unwilling, he had long known that if he couldn't overcome this disaster, he would be a pawn abandoned by his superiors and would die without a doubt. What else could he say? He pressed his forehead against the floor and fell completely silent. Your Highness Duke of Qin is wise to have caught such a large pest for the people of South Ning. This is truly a blessing for the common people. Official Yu switched to flattery. However, Long Fei Yi didn't even look at him. Coldly, he said, Men, hang Nangwa Mingda at the city gates and starve him for 3 days and 3 nights. Embezzling grain from the disaster victims? Then let him have a taste of starvation. Although Nangwa Mingda had already accepted his fate, he was still afraid. He kowtowed and begged, Your Highness Duke of Qin, please spare me. Please spare me. This official won't dare do it again. Please spare me, Your Highness Duke of Qin. Long Fei was an intelligent man who'd grown up in a court filled with both open and covert struggles. He understood Official Yu's threat to Nangwa Mingda as soon as he heard it. He had plenty of ways to protect Nangwa Mingda's old mother and young grandson and force Nangwa Mingda to give up the exact amount of grain that had been sent to South Ning Prefecture. But he wasn't willing. Nangwa Mingda controlled South Ning Prefecture. Without his cooperation, how much could Official Yu and his superiors embezzle? Long Fei didn't like to give more chances to those who deserved it. He ignored Nangwa Mingda's pleas and said coldly, Men, take him away immediately. Your Highness Duke of Qin, please spare me. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this official knows his wrongs. I know my wrongs. Nangwa Mingda's pleas were quickly drowned out by the cheers of the commoners. 2 guards carried him to the city gates. Someone threw a stone, and the commoners all followed suit. Before Nangwa Mingda even reached the gates, he was already covered in injuries and bumps on his head. Nangwa Mingda truly regretted his actions. If he could, he would have rather offended the imperial uncle than offend his Highness Duke of Qin now. If he hadn't incited the commoners like that, would his Highness Duke of Qin have been more merciful? Fine. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Official Yu's back was drenched in cold sweat as he watched Nangwa Mingda's wretched figure disappear into the distance. He only rejoiced that Nangwa Mingda was sensible enough to not give up too much. He glanced at the mountains of grain around him and hurriedly tried to curry favor. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this official has detailed data on the disaster victims in South Ning. This official is willing to do everything in his power to help Your Highness distribute the grain. But Long Fei Yi still ignored him and treated him like air. Seeing this, Official Yu didn't dare to speak again. His heart was filled with apprehension. The more His Highness Duke of Qin ignored him, the more uncertain he felt. He didn't believe that His Highness Duke of Qin would let him off so easily. Filled with fear and trepidation, he waited respectfully on the side, too afraid to leave. Long Fei Yi ordered, Chu Shifeng, make arrangements to distribute grain by county and village. Tell the people below that anyone who dares to embezzle, even if it's just a single grain, will meet the same fate as Nangwa Mingda. Yes. Chu Shifeng obeyed and left. Such a large amount of grain would have to be distributed by the various Yamen officials. Long Fei didn't have enough men with him. With Nangwa Mingda hanging at the city gate, Not only would the people below not dare to act recklessly, but even the people above would be anxious. After the people dispersed, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi settled down at the South Ning Prefecture official's estate. Official Yu was 100 times unwilling, but he had no choice but to follow them inside. He really couldn't figure out where His Highness Duke of Qin had found so much grain. Of course, he didn't have time to worry about that now. He silently told himself that no matter how His Highness Duke of Qin interrogated him, he had to hold on. He couldn't reveal the true amount of grain. For better or worse, he was a fourth-rank official in the Ministry of Revenue and had the imperial uncle's support. He was also the emperor's personal ambassador for grain distribution. As long as His Highness Duke of Qin didn't find the true amount of grain, he couldn't do anything to him. But reality soon proved that official Yu had underestimated His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin didn't even ask for the exact amount of grain, but issued orders. As the ambassador for grain distribution, Yu Guangfu allowed the South Ning Prefecture official to embezzle grain. He didn't report what he knew, so his crime is 3 levels higher. Someone come, take Yu Guangfu to jail. Your lordship wants to interrogate him personally. Yu Guangfu was stunned by his words. He never expected His Highness Duke of Qin to accuse him of such a crime. Your Highness, this official has been wrongly accused. This official just arrived at South Ning Prefecture as well, so I didn't know the situation here. Official Yu tried to explain himself. Long Fei Yi laughed coldly. Then where were you before? This official was in Longxi Prefecture. Yu Guangfu replied hastily. Longxi Prefecture has even less grain in their hands than South Ning Prefecture. Plenty of their corpses have been exposed in the middle of the night. 2 riots have already broken out in Longxi Prefecture. Do you think your lordship doesn't know a thing? Long Fei retorted. Official Yu was so alarmed that he fell to his knees. Your Highness, this official only made an accurate assessment of the situation and gave out grain. As for where it went, this official really... His Majesty only gave this official the responsibility of distributing grain. That's not part of this official's duties. He actually pushed Emperor Tianhui into the picture. Long Fei Ye's eyes flickered with disdain before he gave a cold snort. Your lordship isn't investigating the unequal distribution of grain, but the fact that you didn't report it. Someone come, hurry and take him away. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this official didn't know anything about the situation. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this official is His Majesty's personal envoy. You can't, Your Highness Duke of Qin. No matter how official Yu tried to explain himself or beg for mercy, Long Fei Yi remained indifferent, even when he brought up Emperor Tianhui again. Since he was already in the disaster areas, he had the final say in everything. He waved a hand and indicated for the guards to take the man away. Han Yunqi couldn't help but burst into laughter as she watched official Yu struggle to leave. What are you laughing at? Long Fei Yi asked. Chapter 387. You're laughing at His Highness for forcing a confession out of him, Han Yunqi said with a grin. Official Yu didn't just control the amount of grain sent to South Ning Prefecture. There were 2 other disaster areas as well. The difference between the amount on the books and the amount Long Fei Yi had personally investigated was the most direct evidence of corruption. Things had already gotten to this point. With Long Fei's personality, how could he have the patience to waste time investigating? Since he'd captured official Yu, he'd naturally forced the truth out of his mouth. Forcing a confession out of him wasn't a good phrase, but Long Fei Yi didn't get angry. Instead, he asked, Do you have any good methods? Han Yunqi was amused. Your Highness, you found the right person. Han Yunqi had plenty of poisons in her hands that could make people wish they were dead. When the attendants on the side heard the couple's conversation, they suddenly felt like they were colluding with each other. His Highness Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei aren't good people. It's best not to offend them. For the next few days, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi stayed at the senior provincial official's estate, keeping an eye on the distribution of grain while slowly tormenting official Yu. During these days, the other 2 disaster areas began to send grain as well. News of South Ning Prefecture's governor being hung at the city gates spread to the other two prefectures as well. The loyal officials applauded and cheered, while the corrupt officials trembled with fear. They came up with all sorts of excuses to spit out the grain they'd eaten, afraid that they'd end up worse than Nangwa Mingda if they didn't do it in time. According to estimates, His Highness Duke of Qin's grain, combined with the grain the corrupt officials spat out, was enough to keep the disaster areas safe for a month and a half. Long Fei had no plans to visit the other two prefectures, nor did he have time to spare for the minor officials. His eyes were fixed on the man at the very top. Within a few days, news of the grain distribution had spread all over the country. The rumors of His Highness Duke of Qin's corruption were dispelled on their own. The more popular the rumors were, the more sensational the praises were. The Duke of Qin's disaster relief had become Tianing country's #1 event. News of it had even spread outside the country. His Highness Duke of Qin's reputation was already resounding, and this time, it caused another stir. The disaster relief wasn't over yet, but His Highness Duke of Qin had already won the hearts of the people. The imperial uncle was the first to receive the news. He slumped in front of his desk, unable to move for a long time. If the imperial uncle still couldn't figure out where the Long Fei had gotten so much food at this point, then he might as well not be the imperial uncle anymore. Scam. This was simply a trap. It had been a trap since the charity auction began. Not only was he cheated of his money, but he was also cheated of his food. This blow was just too great. The price he had to pay for coming to his senses was just too painful. The imperial uncle sat in a daze for a long time before he suddenly came to his senses and shouted, "Someone, go get Qian Rong for old man, quick!" Since Long Fei was able to buy grain from the black market, it meant that he knew that the Lin clan's grain store was under the imperial uncle's control. The imperial uncle's residents had never had direct contact with the Lin clan's grain store. Even a secret letter had to be passed through several hands. Back then, the imperial uncle was in a hurry to cash in on the black market, so he left everything to Qianrong and had him handle the negotiations. Later on, Qianrong even brought the two sellers to the warehouse to transport the grain. Now that he thought about it, the imperial uncle finally understood and regretted it. Unfortunately, it was already too late. If the Long Fei found any clues from Qianrong and traced them back to the imperial uncle's residence, then everything would be over. Reporting to Master, Qianrong isn't in the residence, an attendant quickly reported. Then where did he go? The imperial uncle cried out in alarm. This subordinate doesn't know. I heard from my subordinates that they haven't seen him in several days. The attendant replied truthfully. The imperial uncle's face paled. Find him. Immediately find old man. The next night, the guards who'd gone out to search for Qianrong returned with confirmed news. Qianrong had gone missing. There was no news of him, not even from his hometown. The imperial uncle was completely flustered. He immediately ordered the imperial uncle to sever all ties with the Lin clan's grain store and secretly destroyed all the mouths of the Lin clan's grain store. Someone, go to the Yu estate and bring Yu Guangfu's wife and children here. Quickly, the imperial uncle hurriedly ordered. Unfortunately, it was too late. The Yu clan had already fallen under the Long Fei's control as soon as he left the capital. How could the honorable Duke of Qin fight a battle he wasn't confident in winning? The imperial uncle was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, but his nephew, the crown prince, whom he fully supported, was laughing at him behind his back. It had to be said that this was a kind of irony. Before long Tianmo received the news, he said to Mu Qinggu, "Young general, it's fortunate that the betrothal gifts were all used for disaster relief. Otherwise, once the imperial uncle's residence fell, the general's residence wouldn't be able to escape the curses of public opinion." A complicated look flitted through Mu Qingwu's eyes, but he didn't reply. He'd chosen to side with the crown prince precisely because he wanted to use this opportunity to infiltrate the imperial uncle's residence and uncover the dark secrets of corruption. However, as he grew closer and closer to Long Tianma, he discovered that the crown prince was more resentful than anyone else about the imperial uncle's corruption. The imperial uncle was also wary of the crown prince, so he didn't let him know much about the disaster relief. "Young general, I'm sure the great general will be much more relieved now," Long Tianma asked. His marriage to Mu Luyue had been arranged by Mu Qingwu. The great general had always been neutral and didn't have a good impression of the imperial uncle's residence. He'd originally been vehemently opposed to this marriage, but he'd only reluctantly agreed because he couldn't persuade Mu Luyue otherwise. Now that the imperial uncle's residence was about to fall, perhaps the great general would no longer have any misgivings and wholeheartedly support his son-in-law? Mu Qingwu hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke. Your Highness Crown Prince, the imperial uncle's residence has deep roots. Rome wasn't built in a single day. Hearing this, Long Tianma rejoiced. He'd been beating around the bush time and time again, but Mu Qingwu had finally given him a direct answer. He knew that the great general's residence wouldn't be interested in such a meager betrothal gift. How could his position be affected by the marriage of his daughter, who had been abolished? Old General Mu probably already knew which side the great general's residence would support. I'm just worried that imperial father and imperial grandmother won't be easy to talk to. So I'll have to ask old General Mu to make a trip to the palace, Long Tianma said in a low voice. The imperial uncle's residence truly had a special status. Even if His Highness Duke of Qin managed to find concrete evidence, the great general's imperial father would be the one to convict him in the end. Actually, imperial father had long known about the imperial uncle's corruption, but he'd always turned a blind eye to it. After all, a single move against the imperial uncle's estate would affect the rest as well. Right now, the power balance in the imperial court was still balanced, so imperial father wouldn't make any rash moves against either side. But if General Mu could make a personal trip to the palace and express his determination to support the Eastern Palace, then everything would be different. With the support of the general's estate, the Eastern Palace would gain a firm foothold in the imperial court. As for the imperial uncle's estate, imperial father could seize the chance to get rid of them. Mu Qingwu thought that he'd taken a risk this time. Although he hadn't been able to find any evidence of the imperial uncle's corruption, he could at least help out in this matter. Seeing the sincere look in the crown prince's eyes, he secretly rejoiced that he'd chosen the right path. Your Highness, this soldier will go back immediately and convince father. The Empress Dowager still. Before Mu Qingwu could finish, Long Tianma patted his chest and promised, Empress Dowager, leave it to this crown prince. You can set your mind at ease. Emperor Tianhui had received the news even before the imperial uncle's estate. He'd shut himself in his study and refused to see anyone. Your Majesty, His Highness Crown Prince has already been waiting by the door for a long time, Eunuch Luo reported in a low voice. Didn't I say Jin wouldn't see anyone? Emperor Tianhui clenched his fists and slammed them against the secret missive on the table, his brows furrowed in irritation. His Highness says he has something very important to discuss. He has to see Your Majesty, Eunuch Luo ventured to report. Pass down orders. Zhen's body is unwell, so court will be adjourned for 3 days. However, if there are any urgent memorials to send to the heart-nurturing pavilion, the Crown Prince will take care of everything else. Emperor Tianhui waved his hand impatiently before rising to his feet and heading for the heart-nurturing pavilion. The disaster areas hadn't even ended yet, but the Duke of Qin had already won the hearts of the people. How could he be content with that? With such a huge commotion in the disaster areas, it was only a matter of time before something happened to the imperial uncle's estate. Over the past few days, both the crown prince and the civil and military officials in court had been writing memorials to either defend the imperial uncle's estate or kick him while he was down. Even an emperor like him had his moments of difficulty making decisions. The imperial uncle's estate had many friends and powerful supporters in court. Emperor Tianhui had a love-hate relationship with them. He wanted to get rid of them quickly, but also make full use of them. Unfortunately, it wasn't time yet. The Duke of Qin was truly abominable. He'd only been in the disaster areas for less than 10 days, but he'd already caused so much trouble for Emperor Tianhui. Of course, that wasn't Emperor Tianhui's biggest headache. Right now, he was thinking of a way to strike back at the Duke of Qin. After all, the disaster areas weren't over yet. If he let the Duke of Qin get away so easily, then the people would only know him as Tianix's Duke of Qin in the future, but not Emperor Tianhui. Eunuch Luo had followed him closely, so he could more or less guess at Emperor Tianhui's thoughts. Your Majesty, it's still early winter. True winter hasn't arrived yet. If they wanted new crops, they'd have to wait until spring at the latest and harvest them in the summer. There was still a long way to go before the disaster areas. Eunuch Luo had hit the nail on the head, but Emperor Tianhui was too distracted to listen. He glared at Eunuch Luo and snapped, "Get lost!" Frightened, Eunuch Luo quickly backed away, but Long Tianma blocked his way as soon as he reached the door to the imperial study. Eunuch Luo, is Imperial Father really ill? Long Tianma asked doubtfully. Your Highness Crown Prince, His Majesty's body isn't well. You should go back, Eunuch Luo coaxed. Did he summon Imperial Physician Gu? Long Tianma asked next. Only an Imperial Physician could speak with his Imperial Father at a time like this. Your Highness, His Majesty hasn't summoned an Imperial Physician yet, but it definitely can't be Imperial Physician Gu. He took sick leave a month ago and went back to his hometown. He won't be back so soon, Eunuch Luo replied honestly. He took such a long leave. Long Tianma was doubtful, but didn't think much of it. After all, he was just an Imperial Physician. Currently, Han Yunxi was far away in South Ning Prefecture, treating Long Fei Ye's wounds. The two of them happened to mention Gu Beiwei. I heard that Gu Beiwei took sick leave and went back to his hometown? Long Fei Yi rarely brought up the name in front of Han Yunxi. Really? Who did your Highness hear that from? Han Yunxi grew doubtful. They'd been out for over a month now, so why was this fellow still asking about Gu Beiwei's whereabouts? She originally thought that Long Fei Yi did not understand medicine and would not suspect so much. She didn't expect that in the end. She couldn't escape his eyes. The wound on Long Fei Ye's chest should have taken several months to heal. Now, it had basically healed in a little more than a month. Moreover, during this month, Long Fei Yi often did not listen to warnings and acted recklessly. Long Fei Ye's body had a good foundation and strong self-healing ability. The effectiveness of the medicine she had on hand was mostly a factor. However, the most important factor was that Long Fei Yi was treated by Gu Beiwei. Gu Beiwei said that if Long Fei Yi did not wake up that night, he might become a vegetable. However, reality proved that Long Fei Yi could wake up a few days later. Gu Beiwei said that Long Fei Ye's wound had to be bandaged every day for a month. He could not act recklessly and could not use his martial arts. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, Long Fei Yi moved around a lot during this month, but he was still fine. If the person who treated Long Fei Yi was not Gu Beiwei, he would definitely be treated as a quack doctor. However, the person who treated Long Fei Yi was Gu Beiwei himself. Either Long Fei Ye's body was too special, or Gu Beiwei's medical skills were extremely high. Now, it seemed that it was the latter. Therefore, Gu Beiwei actually deliberately concealed his medical skills. Han Yunxi quickly came back to her senses and continued what she was doing. She cut open the gauze and unraveled it. Even though she knew that the wound had already healed, she was still very careful. She was afraid that she would hurt Long Fei Yi. Should this prince send someone to prepare a generous gift and send it to Imperial Physician Gu's hometown to thank him for saving my life? Long Fei Yi suddenly said. At this time, Han Yunxi could no longer remain calm. It had always been other people who sent generous gifts to His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin had never sent anyone a generous gift before. If the Duke of Qin wanted to send Gu Beiwei a generous gift, it wouldn't be considered a gift. It would be more like a reward. There would be procedures to go through. Once the cumbersome reward process began, they would first have to go to the Imperial Physician Hospital to find out the whereabouts of Imperial Physician Gu's hometown. Then, they would have to find Gu Beiwei. If they couldn't find Gu Beiwei, not sending the reward was a small matter. However, lying to the monarch and asking for sick leave was a big matter. Long Fei Yi, this rascal, was clearly testing Gu Beiwei. Your Highness, how could a mere generous gift be enough to repay the debt of saving your life? As soon as Han Yunxi finished speaking, Long Fei Yi raised his brows and looked over. She hurriedly added, Gu Beiwei is an imperial physician. Treating your highness is part of his duty. There's no debt of gratitude to speak of. He should be thanking the heavens and earth that he didn't cause your highness to fall ill. As for the reward, this concubine thinks it's better to forget about it. Han Yunxi's words were so bureaucratic and beautiful, but the actual meaning was, Long Fei Yi. Ah, Long Fei Yi. Although Gu Beiwei is suspicious, he didn't try to kill you when your life was in danger. At the very least, he's not your enemy. You should spare him whenever possible. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunxi for a long time before saying, You haven't improved, but your mouth has improved a lot. Your highness is too kind. Han Yunxi didn't dare to look at Long Fei Yi. She lowered her head and pretended to be very serious as she continued to treat the wound. Long Fei Yi didn't have the heart to send the generous gift. As for whether he continued to investigate Gu Beiwei behind the scenes, only he knew. After calming down, Long Fei Yi relaxed and lay down, closing his eyes. Han Yunxi's attention quickly focused on Long Fei Ye's wound. In front of Long Fei Ye's matter, no matter who it was, they couldn't easily disturb her heart and steal her attention. It was quiet inside the house, and it was also quiet outside. The night was cold and the north wind was gradually getting stronger. The white-clothed man stood outside the unlatched window. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, as if no one and nothing could ever break this Ningjing that came from the depths of his heart. Seeing that Han Yunxi had completely removed the gauze, he seemed to have no interest in the recovery of the wound. He turned his head and quietly disappeared into the night. The gauze on Long Fei Ye's wound was completely removed. Because of a month of bandaging, the large patch of skin over his heart was much paler. There were bits and pieces of greenish-black medicine residue scattered over it. There was a scar that was more than an inch long near his heart. It looked somewhat sinister under the pale skin. The scar was a memory that the body left for its owner. Han Yunxi looked at the scar and recalled everything that had happened in the U prison. Then, she looked at Long Fei Ye's handsome face that was as cold and silent as ever. Her heart still felt afraid. Long Fei Yi, thank goodness you're still alive in this world. When nothing happened, Long Fei Yi opened his eyes. What's wrong? It's nothing. I'm just letting the wound breathe. As Han Yunxi explained, she took care of the dregs of the medicine and disinfected them. Then everything was settled. She hadn't even put on her clothes when Chu Shifeng rushed in. Your Highness, Your Highness. Chu Shifeng was holding a secret missive in his hands, as if he had something urgent to discuss. But Long Fei Yi didn't panic. He didn't say a word, but waved a hand to indicate that he should withdraw. Chapter 389. Official, you really only had last words left to speak of. Over the past few days, Han Yunxi had long gotten information from him about the amount of grain that the imperial court had sent to the 3 disaster regions, as well as the actual amount that had reached them. As luck would have it, the difference was about the same as the grain they'd bought from the imperial uncle's estate. Han Yunxi didn't ask official Yu who'd embezzled the grain, either. All she needed to do was give official Yu's signed testimony to Emperor Tianhui, then report the imperial uncle's relationship with the Lin clan's grain store. Everything would be up to the imperial uncle to explain himself. Perhaps he'd even come up with some interesting and preposterous explanations. Of course, Long Fei Yi wasn't stupid enough to hand over the memorial himself. If Long Fei handed over the memorial directly, then only Emperor Tianhui would be able to see all the evidence. The imperial uncle was a man of great power and influence, after all, so Emperor Tianhui might not punish him. But if he borrowed someone else's hands, then things would be different. Han Yunxi had always assumed that Long Fei Yi would borrow the crown prince's hand. Long Fei Yi was well aware of the crown prince's personality and grudge against the imperial uncle's estate. But Long Fei Yi only said, Chu Shifeng, organize all the evidence and give it to General Mu. General Mu. Han Yunxi was stunned. She never thought that General Mu could be used as well. General Mu wasn't marrying off his daughter for the sake of betrothal gifts, but so that she'd have a good home to return to. Although he was despicable, General Mu had no choice but to do so. Pity the hearts of all parents in the world. If General Mu was given a chance to topple the imperial uncle's estate and cut off all ties between the crown prince and his estate, then the crown prince's name would be clean and the Mu clan wouldn't be cursed by anyone. This was giving General Mu a chance, as well as a huge favor from His Highness Duke of Qin. Even if General Mu's estate was truly loyal to the crown prince, they wouldn't dare to openly oppose the Duke of Qin's estate. Your Highness, the spies have reported that Mu Qingwu has been very close to the crown prince recently, Chu Shifeng replied in a low voice. Although they were far away from the capital, none of their movements could escape His Highness Duke of Qin's eyes. Long Tianma was trained by Tianhui after all. How stupid could he be? It was hard to tell whether Long Fei Ye's words were praise or mockery. Even if Long Tianma could convince the general to lobby Emperor Tianhui, he'd still need proof. Strictly speaking, the Duke of Qin had helped Long Tianma a lot. If he didn't cut ties with the imperial uncle's estate, Long Tianma wouldn't be able to go far. Han Yunxi remained silent as she listened. Emperor Tianhui had no choice but to hide. Now that things had gotten to this point, what else could Emperor Tianhui do? He could only borrow the momentum to push the crown prince forward and make him look like a man who placed righteousness above family. Less than half a month later, the entire case was revealed with irrefutable evidence. The imperial uncle was stripped of his title of duke and demoted to a commoner. Half of his family's property was confiscated, and he plummeted from his lofty perch into the mud. If this case hadn't been tried and judged by the crown prince, then perhaps the imperial uncle wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. He would have lost his position as duke and his family's fortune. But this time, the imperial uncle lost the crown prince. The crown prince was the imperial uncle's future, but he'd already lost it. Who else in the court dared to associate with him or form an alliance with him? Instead, it was the neutral General Mu's estate that replaced the imperial uncles as the center of power. Mu Liuyue's loss of face at the wedding was finally redeemed this time. It was also at this moment that General Mu became the crown prince's true backer. Emperor Tianhui stood on the roof of a tall building overlooking the capital city. Eunuch Luo, this result can be considered as Tianma getting a share of the action. Emperor Tianhui was quite satisfied with the results. At least General Mu and the crown prince had won over the hearts of the people, especially the crown prince. This was the first time he'd risen to prominence after recovering from his illness. Your Majesty, your heart still loves His Highness Crown Prince, Eunuch Luo chuckled. How could Eunuch Luo know the depth of the situation? He was only saying pleasing words. Emperor Tianhui only smiled without a word. A son inheriting his father's legacy was the same, even for the throne. As an emperor, he was very clear that his best choice was the crown prince. Currently, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had climbed to the top of South Ning Prefecture's tallest mountain and were looking towards the north. Your Highness, you're single-handedly cultivating the crown prince into a formidable opponent, Han Yunxi grinned. First, your lordship has to cultivate him into a formidable opponent for Tianhui. Long Fei Yi was very direct. Compared to Emperor Tianhui, Long Fei Ye's imperial uncle understood Long Tianma better. Emperor Tianhui must have forgotten how cruel he'd been to Long Tianma in the past, but Long Fei Yi remembered. Long Tianma remembered even more. Emperor Tianhui had never imagined that the crown prince's rise to power today would mark the beginning of the end of his imperial career. Looking at Long Fei Ye's indifferent profile and silent eyes, Han Yunxi thought of a saying. Strategizing within the tent can lead to absolute victory thousands of li away. The man by her side had the power to take Tianning's throne, but he was so indifferent and indifferent. He'd only kill people when they provoked him. Aside from that, he preferred things to be in a state of balance. She knew he didn't just want Tianning, but it was a good thing to take it down first. Why wasn't he making a move? She couldn't help but feel that he was waiting for something. Just what was it? Did it have anything to do with the perplexing butterfly illusion in her hands? Han Yunxi couldn't help but yawn as the cold wind blew against her face. Long Fei Yi immediately took off his cloak and covered it with hers before pulling her into his arms. Stand with your lordship for a while longer. Han Yunshi murmured. At this moment, Chu Shifeng suddenly descended in a hurry, as if he had something to report. But he held back and said, Your Highness, it's windy here. It's better to go back. Han Yunshi was still lost in her thoughts and didn't notice Chu Shifeng's strange behavior. Long Feiyi glanced at Chu Shifeng before descending the mountain. Back at the senior provincial official's estate, Han Yunshi went to get more clothes. It was getting colder and colder. As soon as she left, Chu Shifeng rushed to report, Your Highness, that person from the hidden pavilion woke up. Something's happened. That person from the hidden pavilion referred to the mysterious person imprisoned there. Last time, she'd been badly frightened by the black-robed men and hit her head. She'd been unconscious until now, but had finally woken up. Long Fei looked at him coldly, his gaze clearly questioning. After the black-robed men discovered the hidden pavilion, the mysterious person hadn't stayed put. Tang Li had only been guarding the place as a bait to lure the black-robed man out. They'd long brought the mysterious person to the disaster areas and locked her up near South Ning Prefecture. Chu Shifeng had sent people to keep an eye on her. Your Highness, this subordinate didn't do a thing. That person insisted on leaving and even tried to force the guards to let her go, Chu Shifeng reported. She'd been like this when she was imprisoned at the hidden pavilion, but things had calmed down later. Perhaps the kidnapping and the change of environment had given her a fright. Long Feiyi took out a painting from his sleeve. Give it to her. But before Chu Shifeng could take it, he withdrew it again. Your lordship will go personally. He was going to have a good chat with her sooner or later, so it was time for him to pay her a visit. Your Highness, I don't think that's a good idea. What if esteemed Wang Fei suspects? Chu Shifeng grew timid. If esteemed Wang Fei found out about this, she'd probably turn the heavens upside down. Just keep your mouth shut, Long Fei said coldly. Chu Shifeng was still very nervous. After all, this wasn't a small matter, nor was it a big deal. Your Highness, what if esteemed Wang Fei asks where you went? Chu Shifeng asked next. Long Feiyi didn't answer, but simply left. Chu Shifeng hesitated for a long time before following after him. If esteemed Wang Fei can't find me, then there's no need to lie. Long Feiyi arrived at an abandoned courtyard on the outskirts of the city when all the guards appeared. He gestured for them to withdraw and personally opened the door. Who could be imprisoned inside? Heaven knows how many guards Long Feiyi had left at the senior provincial official's estate, but this white-robed man had managed to fool all of them to sit in Long Feiyi's seat and make tea. Han Yunshi was still worried and locked the door. Could it be that His Highness Duke of Qin doesn't welcome me? The white-robed man teased. Whenever Han Yunshi mentioned the Shadow Clan or Western Qin's imperial family to Long Feiyi, he'd avoid her. It wasn't clear whether he wasn't interested or didn't want to talk about it. She didn't know what Long Feiyi's attitude towards this gentleman from the Shadow Clan was, but she wasn't an idiot. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? How could the white-robed man show up as soon as Long Feiyi was gone? This white-robed man obviously took a fancy to Long Feiyi's absence and came here. You should know better than me whether I'm welcome or not. Han Yunshi smiled. Miss Yunshi is truly intelligent. The white-robed man poured tea for her like a master of the room, his movements elegant and casual. Han Yunshi wasn't in the mood for tea. She placed a hand on the table and asked, Are you here for me, or for the poisoned beast? She'd asked him this question before, but he'd said he'd answer it the next time they met. Now it was time to give her an answer. He had to be a member of the Shadow Clan. If he was here for her, then her identity was confirmed. Han Yunshi was very anxious, but the white-robed man was leisurely and self-satisfied as he began to play Tai Chi good tea. As expected, His Highness Duke of Qin's tea is extraordinary. Those who don't believe can't be friends. You can leave. Han Yunshi was unhappy. She couldn't be friends with people who didn't keep their promises. This man had clearly promised her. She had been waiting for a few months, hoping for a few months, And when he finally agreed to come, it turned out to be like this. Miss Yunshi, I'm here for the poison beast, the white-robed man finally said, a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Then why did you risk your life to protect me? Han Yunshi wouldn't believe him so easily. If Junie Xia had bullied any other girl that day, this one would have risked my life to save her too, the white-robed man explained. Han Yunshi shook her head. You're lying. Miss Yunshi, could it be that in your heart, people always have a motive for helping each other? The white-robed man asked. Han Yunshi gave a cold snort. You're lying. If you're here for the poison beast, why didn't you take it away? The white-robed man was Han Yunshi's savior, but she was still calm and objective before him. The white-robed man retorted, the poison beast has already recognized its master. Do you think I can take it away? Lil Thing really was clinging to her, so no one could take it away. A complicated look flashed past Han Yunshi's eyes before she asked, You knew long ago that the poison beast would recognize its master? The white-robed man laughed. Miss Yunshi, if I knew long ago that the poison beast would recognize you as its master, why would I go through the extra trouble of following you into the sky pit? After circling around the topic, Han Yunshi discovered that this white-robed man had calmly answered all her questions with a few words. Could it be that she and Long Fei Yi had been overthinking things? You're from the Shadow Clan? Han Yunshi asked next, but the white-robed man only stood up with a faint smile. Next time, then. If we meet again, I'll answer you. This move again. Han Yunshi wasn't going to let him go so easily, but Su Donglin's voice came from outside. Esteemed Wang Fei, open the door. Lunch has been delivered. Han Yunshi looked back, but the white-robed man had already vanished into thin air. Even the tea set on the tea table had been cleaned up, leaving no trace behind. White-robed man. Ah, white-robed man. Although you answered my question, you didn't tell me why you were hiding from Long Fei Yi. Han Yunshi opened the door, but wasn't in the mood to eat. Should she tell Long Fei Yi about today's events, or hide them from him for now? The white-robed man hadn't gone far. Or rather, he'd been there the entire time. He thought that if they never met again, they'd never lie to each other. Who knew that even after 20 years of cultivation, he couldn't beat the sight of her back? Seeing that Han Yunshi wasn't in the mood to eat, the white-robed man gave a silent sigh before turning to hide in the shadows outside the room. Meanwhile, in the abandoned courtyard in the southern suburbs, the wall cutter had finally calmed down. Only a small dent had been made in the earth wall, but it hadn't affected the overall situation. She dejectedly tossed aside 2 sharp stones and slowly turned around, her head bowed in despair. Chu Shifeng had been waiting by her side for 2 hours. When he saw her give up, he exhaled and hurried forward, gesturing for her to enter. Mute Granny, His Highness has come personally. You've put on quite the airs. That's right. The person Long Fei Yi had imprisoned was none other than Mute Granny, the very same woman Chu Shifeng had escorted back to Tianning's capital city. All that talk about being robbed on the way and Mute Granny falling off a cliff was a fabrication. Long Fei Yi's orders from the start were to take Mute Granny to the hidden pavilion and imprison her. Naturally, Mute Granny couldn't hear Chu Shifeng's words. She didn't even spare him a glance as she stormed into the room. Inside, Long Fei Yi had been waiting for ages. Why did he want to imprison Mute Granny? And he'd done it behind Han Yunshi's back. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.